Welcome everyone to today's meeting of the Environment and Regeneration Declarations of Interest.
Hello, Councillor McCormick. Councillor Clockerty's not arrived yet.
Right, okay. We'll give Jim a minute.
Jackson, Councillor McCabe.
Can I ask, is anybody else having connectivity issues today?
It's all fine in the municipal buildings.
All fine there. Okay. Right, okay. I see we've got, Dan, you want to go through that? I see we've got a declaration from...
Hi, Councillor
Chris.
McCormick. We've got an apology from Councillor Nelson with Councillor MacLeod substituting. We've got a declaration of interest from Councillor Curley as a board member of River Clyde Homes in relation to item 7. Are there any other declarations of interest? No.
No. Okay, before we start, we'll, if I can just bring your attention to the fact that all committee members, council officers and others joining the remote meeting should note that the public elements of the meeting are being live streamed and will subsequently be available on the council website. Okay, these are all looking nice and tidy today anyway, so that's good. Okay, if we can move on to the agenda items, item number 2 is the Environment Regeneration Revenue and Capital Budget 2021 to 2022. Matt, are you starting us off on this?
Thank you, Convener. Yes. This is the standard revenue capital report that we're now putting up to committee. I would draw your attention to paragraph 2.2 and the current projection for the revenue budget, which is £73,000 overspend. Now, this is a significant improvement from prior periods when it's reduced by £184,000. The main reasons for that are shown in paragraph 2.3, and I'll go through them in detail in a moment. I would highlight that officers will continue to review the budgets with a view to bringing this down further if we can by the end of the year. Okay. The capital position is highlighted at 2.4. Overall, this committee is on budget. We're now showing slippage of 1.821 million, 6.4%, and this is an increase from previous period of 1.013 million. Again, officers will continue to review that with our view to improving it, but given the time of year we're at, and also some of the issues we're still experiencing, I think with COVID in the background, I think it'll be challenging to improve that much further. I don't intend to go through any of the report in detail at this stage, but I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Okay, Matt, thanks very much. Do we get any questions for Matt? I don't see anything in the chat. Are we all quite happy? Can we agree the recommendations in the report?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, item number 3 is the Environment Regeneration Capital Programme progress and property related items. We've got Gail and Eddie and Matt. So who wants to kick us off? Gail, you're first on my list. Do you want to start off?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I'm happy to commence. I don't really have anything to add to the information that's in the report. As Matt has advised, we are still having the effects of the COVID pandemic, and as we continue to progress with these projects, we have plans in place to reflect any impact of that. So the position is as within the report, and I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thanks, Gail. I'll maybe bring in Eddie and Matt, and then we can ask questions of the 3 members if that's okay with everyone else. So, Eddie.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. And similar to Gail, I won't go through all the projects because most of them are still current, given that with a holiday period in between. There's a couple that we'll provide a brief update on. So on the Lyle Fountain project, all of the restored components have now been reinstated. and it's just the water and electrical connections that we have to complete over the next month or so. And again, that's been impacted by materials delivery issues. On the former Babylon building demolition, a contractor has now been appointed, and traffic management arrangements have been made based around a start at the end of January, and that's subject to concluding the final access arrangements with the adjoining property owners, and that's being progressed at the moment. The first phase of the Custom House Square College Roads is noted in the report, and 7.6 was completed just before the holiday period, and the second phase is now out to tender. And then just in section 9, we provided the committee with information on the main projects proposed to be funded from the 2022-23 core property budget, with the largest of those looking to address the last remaining significant roofing project within the municipal buildings campus, and including a continuation of the phased window replacement programme. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Eric. Matt, do you want to come in just now as well?
Yeah, I don't really have anything more to add. The financials are included in the report in item 2, but I'm happy to take any questions on it, obviously.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, I see we've got a name in the chat. We've got Graham Brooks.
Thanks very much, Convener. Just a question on 513, the cremator replacement. It's just to establish, obviously, I see it's progressing well, and we're now design of phase 2 works. So do officers have any insight into whether we'll have to close the crematorium for a period of time? How disruptive will it be? What do the public do for obviously the crucial service that we provide if there is a closure period? I just wonder if there's a little bit of information, and maybe too early, you maybe have to work out phase 2 first, but it's a question that may or may not be able to be answered today.
Thanks, Graham. Who wants to take that? Eddie?
Yeah, Convener, I know that there is a kind of programme being prepared in the background. It is a little early, but there is a kind of plan to phase the cremator replacement, so they both won't be offline at the same time. So one will be removed and one of the new ones will be installed, and then obviously the second one will follow on. So there shouldn't be a period of downtime as such, but obviously there will be some disruption because it does involve works to the rear of the building and to expand the facility for the new cremators. So they're still developing the programme for the phase 2 works, which is essentially the works to the building, and the planning application has gone in for that, and the building warrant information is being prepared at the moment.
Thanks very much, Convener. I'm sure as officers are aware, a very, very sensitive issue of obviously if people are turning up for a cremation or a burial, and there's also workmen around and there's noise. So yeah, I just know that officers will get this right, but I'll just put a plea in that we do all we can to make this work for our constituents.
Okay, Graham, your comments are noted. Thanks. Ronnie?
Thanks, Convener. Maybe quite one or two questions from me, if you don't mind. On 5.6, the Drumshanty Road car park, I wondered how we were progressing in terms of putting a gate on the car park. I think from previous discussions that I had, or we had on this one of the problems was we couldn't get anyone to assume responsibility for opening and closing it. So my first question would be, do we have any progress in terms of moving that one forward? On 5.7, the St Ninian School site, I was really quite intrigued to see that after a year of kind of asking what's going on, that we're looking at contamination levels within the site, and we need a capping layer before we can do much. Now, I know that my colleague Lynn is meeting with the officers next Wednesday on the site, but can we get any more information as to the extent of the capping, what the problem is, and basically how long it's likely to take? And I was really quite surprised in this one, given that there had been a school on the site for 30 plus years. But anyway, and maybe the next one. Sorry, the next one would be 516, Convener. A good story there about the Nature Restoration Fund, and I see that the council has been awarded the £88,000, and it's going to basically to Clyde Muirshield Park. And I just wondered if that fund was specifically targeted for Muirshield Park. Was the grant did the grant specify that if it was successful, it would be used in Muirshiel Park only, and no other woodland or no other habitat areas in Inverclyde? And I think I had one more, and it may be for Eddie, if you don't mind. And it was about Callad House in John Street in Gourock, if I can find it. Yeah, it's 9.4. I just wondered, what are we doing at the moment, you know, to basically to cope with the problems that we have down there? I'm looking at the showers and looking at things. So, you know, what is it we're doing currently to go over that problem right now with showers and toilets? Thanks, Michael.
Okay, Ronnie, thanks. Okay, we'll start with the Drumshanty Road car park gate. Gail, go ahead to that one.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor. There's still discussion ongoing who would operate the gate. It obviously wouldn't be our service. It would need to be someone out with potentially leisure, and we've looked at what that alternative may be. So that's still ongoing. We do not know currently whether we would be able to manage the opening and closing of the gate. In relation to St Ninians, we've been speaking to the contaminated land officer, and the depth of the capping is reflective on what will be grown or what will be carried out on that site. So depending on whether it's a turf surface, a landscaped planting area, or a community gardening area, they all have different depths, and that's why there will be a site visit to have a discussion about what the anticipated final sort of purpose of that area would be. There's also a cost to any capping layer and to the membrane that would be required as well. So we need to determine what that cost is as we have a specific budget available for the works at St Ninians. So that work is ongoing. And in relation to 5.16, the activities that are detailed within that we are able to undertake for the end of financial year reflects growing seasons. So it reflects what activities can be undertaken within this period of time. There's certain vegetation and planting that can only be done in autumn or at summer period, which would not allow us to be able to progress that before the end of spring. Is there anything I missed?
The Nature Restoration Fund being allocated to Muirshiel Park, that was another question.
Yes, thanks, Convener. Yeah, that's the question that reflects to the growing period. So the activities that we can undertake are those that can be planned and completed by the end of March, reflecting the seasons.
Yeah, but I think Ronnie's question was, is that money, is it allocated solely for the use in Muirshiel Country Park?
Yeah, the team are looking at whether there's alternative. You'll recall that we brought other locations that we'd be looking at, and the teams will continue to look at whether there's alternative locations, but anything like that will be brought to members for information. We don't believe that we can progress that before the end of March.
Ronnie, the fourth question was showers.
Yeah,
storage document.
Yeah, yes. Thanks, Convener. Yeah, I was just interested to know if we were with any alternative plans currently, given that there's some logistical problems down there with showers and toilets.
Right. I can answer that.
Okay.
The issue is with the shower cubicles, the ensuite shower cubicles generally throughout the property, and the building services are currently working their way through them in a phased manner. They're still usable, as I understand, but obviously there's various stages of leaks occurring, and obviously the long term, that's not something we can leave unaddressed. Further damage to the property, but it's manageable just now, as I understand, and we're working our way through each of them, and we should have it complete by the end of the current financial year.
Okay, thanks, Eddie. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks very much, John.
Thank you, Convener. There's I should ask up questions rather than question. As it covers three areas: 5.6, 6.4, and 7.5. On 5.6, has there been any monitoring been carried out as to the number of vehicles that have been using the Drumshanty Road car park? Because I have driven past a few times and I noticed that there still seems to be a presumption among many of the drivers that they park on Drumshanty Road or Staffa Street first and foremost before they use the car park, and as a result the streets are still being clogged up. The second one is to do with the town and village centres, and it's the former Babylon building demolition. Now, I note that the property that's called Cheers, the owner, or whom I understand may be the owner, Ian Ellis, has passed away, and whether we should be looking towards a Greenock Town Centre master plan, and if we have already purchased Babylon, would there be any advantage in investigating whether we should also be looking at purchasing Cheers if the price is correct? And on the seawalls and retaining walls, I noticed that the Harbour Authority, Clyport or Peel Ports, if you wish to use that term, charge vessel owners, which includes small yachts that are moored out through their mooring fees. A certain amount of that goes towards conservancy fees. And is there any chance of bearing in mind that much of the damage, any damage, while it could be adverse weather, can also be caused by the wash off vessels? And is there any way that we can recover any costs from Peel through their conservancy fees?
Okay, John, thank you. Okay, the first one is the monitoring of the Drumshanty Road car park. Gail.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor. There's been no monitoring undertaken yet, but the team will look to do that, and we'll look at whether we need to put in some advisory signage just to encourage people to use the car park and be aware that the car park is now operational.
Okay. I see Ronnie's put something on the chat. Ronnie, you want to come in on that?
I just very quickly, Michael, in answer to John's question, and Gail's answered it really. You know, the plan is for double yellows basically right along the front of the car park area. I just wondered when we were going to lay those down and actually make a formal announcement that the car park is open, because right now it's I don't think people are aware of that to a great extent. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Now the Babylon nightclub and the potential for acquiring the Cheers public house. Who wants to take that? Any takers?
Convener.
Stuart?
Yeah, Councillor Crowther's point's well made. It's certainly something that we'll look at if there's an opportunity for us. It would allow us to look at consolidation within that site and perhaps make it a wider site for development purposes. Clearly the economics of it have to stack up, but it's something that we'll look at. Okay,
thanks, Stuart. And John's final question was regarding the sea walls and the vessel charging and Peel Ports.
Convener, I'll take that one as well. I think Councillor Crowther knows what the likely response is, but we'll certainly ask Peel for that.
Okay, thanks very much. Now next up is Chris.
Thank you, Convener. A couple of questions. On the 5.1, cycling, walking in safer streets, obviously this has been identified before. Detailed design of the projects through East India Harbour and Mirren Shore and Port Glasgow. Just wondering where, as elected members, we will be able to see what these proposals are and to be able to comment on them prior to them being implemented. My second query relates to Lyle Fountain, 6.2. I note it says there's going to be restoring of water and electrical works. Does this mean that the fountain is going to be what they call suitable for a potable water supply and for public drinking? And if it is, that's great, but it just means we've got a wee bit of quite a lot of facilities in that area now, because there's also a Scottish Water public water fountain right next to it as well. So that'd be interesting to find out if that's going to be able to be returned to its original use. And lastly, about the Port Glasgow Town Hall list replacement, 7.13. It's just whether can you advise whether or not the lift is going to be in the same location, and if it is, how we're going to be working out the fact is we don't have access to the top floors of the Port Glasgow Town Hall when the lift is being replaced?
Okay, Chris, thank you. So get the cycling lane at East India Harbour and Murn Shore. Gail, do you want to do that one?
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, the team will be looking to engage with local members probably in about 4 to 6 weeks in that to look at feedback and look at some of the design proposals.
Thanks, Gail. And Eddie, you want to take the well fountain, the water of the well fountain and the Port Glasgow lift replacement?
Yes, for you, Convener. The Lyle Fountain will not be restored for potable water drinking use. It is a water feature only, given that there's a Scottish Water potable drinking supply literally a few yards away. Port Glasgow Town Hall lift, it would be, at the moment we're looking to replace it in the same location. However, the size of it will change because at the moment it doesn't meet current standards, and that's part of the problem that's taking so long to get the design right, because it will involve a bit of alteration in that area structurally. Unfortunately, there's not really much you can do in terms of alternative provision whilst that is being replaced. There will be a period of downtime, and that's inevitable, but we'll keep it to a minimum.
Thanks, Eddie. Stuart, do you want to come in there? No? Okay. Okay, now next up is Chris. Chris McElhenney, sorry.
Convener, happy New Year, first of all.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's 2 points. The first point, again, is on Drumshanty Road car park as well. I did go and inspect it at the weekend, and I was quite disappointed with the standard of finish. I had assumed it would be of the same sort of calibre as the car park up at Lady Octavia, so I wondered what's the difference in cost, and is that the reason that the Drumshanty finish isn't as good? Because I would hope it, it still has some work to improve it. The second point would be in regards to the Babylon site as well, obviously just relating to the fact that the intervention we've made there, and again John Street was mentioned earlier. We've still got the ongoing saga with John Street and Shore Street at the corner. It's a complete eyesore. I don't see how it's been acceptable for so long that we've allowed our pavement to be shut off. It's stopping economic investment in the area. So I wonder if officers could give us an update on, would we be able to use the same powers we used in regards to Babylon to take control of that site to improve it, and if we have to effectively demolish it or repair it, just make sure we get it done so it's improved.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So the finish of the Drumshanty Road car park, Gail, first of all.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor. We'll prepare a briefing note that sets out the difference between the two car parks and the different costs, if that is acceptable, and circulate that around members.
Okay.
And the eyesore at the corner of John Street and Kempock Street.
Shore Street.
Sure. Sorry, Shore Street. Stuart?
Through you, Convener, the Gourock Town Centre Regeneration Forum have asked for proposals to improve the visual aspects of that site. As Councillor McElhenney knows, there is a dispute amongst the owners, and what we're trying to do is to find a missing share. However, it's an ongoing saga, and it's something that we'll continue to pursue.
Back in on that, Convener.
Yeah, Chris, then you come.
Yeah, I mean, I think ongoing saga, it would be the diplomatic way to put it. I just can't imagine a situation that if it was, say, Westbrook Hall Street, that we would have allowed for so long our pavement to be completely closed off, wheelchair users, mothers with prams, etc., being forced onto a road. It probably is the greatest eyesore in all of Inverclyde. I know maybe a lot of people don't see it because, they don't come to Gourock often enough. But we seem to continually say it's ongoing, work's ongoing. I think as a council, we really need to get a bit stronger on this, and actually I would ask for a report to be brought to the next meeting setting out exactly what we're proposing to do, because it's unsustainable that there was a decent commercial unit in that corner. No one's going to move in there. We know there's the co-op plans to build the super co-op, which means the Shore Street co-op will close. Why would someone move into that vacant unit considering the condition we've allowed the public realm to come under? And at the end of the day, we're responsible for the public realm. and if there are private individuals stopping us from allowing it to be accessible, stopping investment into our town centre, and importantly stopping, you know, where it's pregnant mothers, mothers with young babies, or wheelchair users from actually using pavements. It's unacceptable that our pavement's been out of action now for something like 3 years.
Stuart?
For you, convener, the reason the pavement's closed is for an exclusion zone to prevent any activity associated with the dangerous aspects of the building. I'll happily take on Councillor McElhinney's comments, and I'll make contact with the existing owners of the property and see if there is something that can be done to accelerate this situation. But the intransigence of the existing owners is reflective in the situation that we find ourselves.
Yeah. Ronnie, do you want to run?
Yeah, just a very quick comment, if you don't mind, Michael, on the point that Chris has just made there and Stuart's replied to. It's hot off the press news, but yesterday at one of the Group meetings, we had a proposal. The Group Regeneration Forum, with Stuart's help, have agreed that there would be a pretty strong construction fence put round the building, and we'd hope to have some curtains there. And then we had a great suggestion yesterday from one of the local traders about what we can do with the curtain space in terms of putting some local art there and some advertising material. So that's bubbling away, and we would hope to formulate that a wee bit better and get that to yourself, Stuart, and get it out to the general group to see what their opinions are of it. But we thought it was a pretty strong suggestion yesterday, just to give you that update. Thanks.
Thanks, Ronnie. Okay, I don't see any more comments. Can we move on? Yeah, the recommendations.
No, convener.
Oh, sorry, Jim. Sorry, forgetting about you, Jim. In you come.
Yeah, how can you forget about me? Come on. Yeah, it's under item 8, City Deal, Greenock Ocean Terminal. Now, I know there's obviously the ongoing works there, but I thought I should raise this anyway. It's regarding obviously during the summer there was limited numbers of ships that came into Greenock, and of course many of the passengers at some points couldn't get off the ships when they came in. But there was MSC, as many people know, there was MSC Virtuosa, Italian ship, cruise ship, which came in and was going down the British Isles, and many people had the opportunity of getting on the ship from there, and then it would stop off at 4 other ports, and the people would get on board. But there was restrictions on the numbers of passengers on the ship. Now, myself, my wife, and some friends took the opportunity of going away for a week on the ship, but we had several complaints from people saying they couldn't get parked. So people arriving at the ocean terminal had problems getting parked, and I did raise this with officers, and I was told that the PO and the council are looking at it. Now, these complaints were with limited numbers of people getting on at Greenock, and it was only for a short voyage. If we had a bigger, if it was more people getting on from Greenock and from Scotland, the parking problem would have been exacerbated even more so. So I just wondered if I could be told, that was last August now, if we're further forward, or appeals further forward in getting parking issues sorted out at Ocean Terminal, remembering that the cruise season will be starting fairly soon again, albeit I don't know how many ships, if any, will be taking on passengers again in Greenock. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jim, thank you. Stuart, do you want to do that?
Yeah, thanks, convener. Convener, embarkation at Greenock has not been a core part of Peel's business. It's something which they aspire to. Clearly, what happened during COVID was special circumstances. Peel have made a commitment. If they are going to grow the embarkation business within Inverclyde, then they will make sure that there's adequate provision of car parking to allow that to happen.
Convener, can I just say thanks for that reply, Stuart. And I realise until now there hasn't been a great deal of people getting on ships in Greenock, but there has been some over the years, particularly the Fred Olsen, the smaller vessels in past years. And as you say, they do aspire, and I hope there is a push, for more ships to, for people to get on ships here in Greenock, because I think it'd be a wonderful opportunity. At the moment, people have to travel mainly, if they want to go on a ship, mainly down to Southampton, which is a heck of a trek for many people. It would boost our local economy greatly if we had the opportunity of more ships coming in here and people boarding here for all sorts of reasons. People staying overnight in hotels and using our restaurants and pubs and shops and whatever else, if they were staying here overnight, as many people do in Southampton. So I hope there is a push by Peel and others to try and increase the number of ships that leave from Greenock and come back to Greenock, picking people up and dropping them off again. I really hope that happens, but they have to be prepared for that, obviously.
Thanks, Jim. I think Stuart will agree that's something that they are looking at. I know it's been discussed in the past. So thanks very much, Jim. Can we agree recommendations? Yeah. Okay. Item number 4 is the CDIP. Stuart?
Convener, through you. Corporate Directorate improvement plans are a key component of the Council's strategic planning and performance management framework. At its meeting on the 14th of September, the Policy and Resources Committee approved the extension of the CDIP and the corporate planning term to April 2023. This performance report in front of you, in terms of the improvement actions, relate to public protection and recovery, roads and environmental shared services, regeneration, planning and property services. We highlight 4 amber improvements, namely tied houses, property fee income targets, city deal and shared services, and 5 greens with strategic housing investment plan, town centres, local housing strategy, jobs, recovery plan and sustainable travel. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, Stuart, thank you very much. Any questions for Stuart? Don't see anything in the chat. Okay, can we agree recommendations?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, thank you. Okay, item number 5 is the general update report. Stuart, you taking that as well?
Thanks, Convener. Since the impact of COVID-19, committee have been advised of a number of issues via an expedited business report or update, and this report provides members with a number of noting points. Members will recall that as part of the precursor to the shared prosperity funds, bids of up to £3 million worth of projects were sought from the Community Renewal Fund for local authorities. Inverclyde submitted a range of eligible projects which totaled £2.3 million. These bids were duly considered, and Inverclyde has been successful in being awarded funding to support 3 local projects, namely Steps to Progression, Project Neptune and West Care Academy. The Council is expected to carry out the administration associated with these awards and can claim up to £16,000. Moving on, in 2019, the Scottish Government introduced the No One Left Behind programme, which sought transformational change in aligning and integrating employability services within Scotland. Scottish Government have introduced the second phase, which will see the cessation of the Employability Fund and Community Jobs Scotland in March 2022, and there will be a move from national to local governance arrangements and move forward towards collaboration and co-production. The service is working with the local employability partnership to prepare a demand statement and delivery plan for No One Left Behind Phase 2 being launched in April. Discussions are ongoing with the Council's procurement service as to how this can be delivered. The Council's also, in respect of seawalls, the Council's also requested to note and approve the direct appointment of a consultant in the amount of £23,436 for specialist marine survey works on the following basis. The service value is below the regulated threshold and below current standing orders threshold. The services are of a specialist nature with limited scope for competition, and I'm happy to take any questions in respect of that. Finally, you'll see that we've received the interim report from the Fraser of Allender Institute on the issues faced by ourselves, Western Bartonshire and Argyll and Bute councils. Not surprisingly, their focus is on population decline, dealing with poverty inequalities, economic recovery and dealing with poverty. Happy to take any questions, Convener.
Okay, thanks very much, Stuart. Any questions for Stuart? Don't see anything in the chat function.
Yes, Convener.
Oh, sorry, Jim, when you come.
Yeah, can I just ask Stuart? There was a bit about land ownership between Newark and Parkway, and I just wonder what the problem is. I mean, as you're aware, I've raised the issue about the pier at Lamment's Pier and about whose ownership that is under, and still haven't really found that out. I just wonder what is the issue? Why can't we find out who owns the land along that strip? Is the land registry not able to tell us that? I mean, what is the main crux here?
Sure.
Through you, Convener, we're simply carrying out detailed title searches because it is quite a complicated title and the potential liabilities associated with it are also quite significant, and that's why we need to make sure that we get the information right.
Okay.
Can I just ask then, do we have any idea how much longer it could take then?
Through you, Convener, we hope to bring a report to the March Committee.
Thank you.
Okay. Chris?
That's it. What happens when a ward councillor steals your thunder, you know?
Right.
I was going to ask a question on 412, but that's been addressed by Jim. Just on 413 then, the Fraser Allender interim report, obviously it's identified a lot of things we probably the known knowns, if you know what I mean. But I'm just wondering when we're going to get some detail on this report and recommendations and implications for how we maybe improve the situation in Inverclyde and the surrounding authorities, similar authorities.
Thank you, Chris. Stuart?
You, Convener, we anticipate having a final report from the Fraser of Allender Institute by the end of January. We will then dissect that report and then come back to committee at a future stage with recommendations on how we take things forward.
Okay.
So will that be before or after the election?
Through you, Convener, it's very much dependent on the content of the final report.
Chris, that won't be the last time somebody asked that question.
I just want to know if we should be interested in it or not, you know.
Okay, can we agree recommendations? Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, item number 6 is the local development plan. Stuart, you again?
Through you, Convener. Members will recall that in July 2020, a decision of the Court of Session quashed Chapter 7 of the Local Development Plan. In light of this, the Council agreed to review its Local Development Plan. A main issues report, the first statutory stage of the preparation of the new plan, was published for consultation in December 2020. Following that, the proposed plan was prepared and consulted upon in July 2021. The next stage of the process would have been to prepare and submit the proposed local development plan to the Scottish Government for consideration. However, given the circumstances set out in the background section of the report, we feel that we should pause to see what happens in the reporter's considerations at west of Quarry Drive. We do believe that we should then consult on an amended plan which reflects the direction of travel of NPF 4 and the timescales for this is set out in paragraph 2.2. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Graham?
Yeah, thanks very much, Convener. I just wondered if Stuart would have an opinion. At 4.8, it talks about Plaintree Yates. He'll be very well aware, more than I am, that it took 28 months to determine this major application. And as that is excessive, my understanding, he'll correct me if I'm not, is that 28 months is excessive? Do you think our planning process was tarnished in the length of time it took us to consider that major application?
Through you, convener, clearly any application goes at the speed at which the applicant provides information. The applicant in this case did take a while to provide planners with information. Yes, the application could have been considered quite more quickly than it was, but I don't believe that our reputation was ultimately tarnished.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't see any more questions. Can we agree on recommendations? Agreed. Okay, thank you. Item number 7 is the Strategic Housing Investment Plan, the SHIP. Martin, are you taking this?
I am. Through you, convener. This is the annual SHIP update, giving the details of progress with programmes already underway and with new potential programmes. Section 5 of the report gives some context on the SHIP, including details of the spend from the Affordable Housing Supply Programme and the resource planning assumption for Inverclyde going forward. Also covers the acquisition programme and some of the areas round about specialist housing provision, including wheelchair accessible housing. Section 6 of the report has details of current activity from partner RSLs across Inverclyde and SHIP projects. And full details of the current and planned projects are available on pages 62 and 63 of the papers and Appendix 1, including potential slippage projects. And page 65, following comments in previous years, contains a glossary of some of the specialist housing terms for members' benefit. Future SHIPs will obviously be informed by the next local housing strategy, and development meetings for those have commenced. We'll be coming back to committee with that in the autumn, I would think, with the initial draft. One error that I've spotted in the actual SHIP document is on page 61, where obviously the draft states that there were no unauthorised encampments last year. There has obviously been one, so that was obviously missed. I was probably correct when the first draft was created and then missed. However, it doesn't change anything in any meaningful manner in terms of the intent. So I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, convener.
Oh, sorry.
So that was Jim Cockerty. Jim, I'll bring you in a minute, okay?
Right.
Jim Cockerty.
Thanks, convener. Thanks for the paper, Martin. It's very good update on the SHIP. And when you're looking at the document, it's great to see the amount of new build houses there's been in Inverclyde and the amount of proposed new build houses in Inverclyde. But of course, the problem with that is it's got a problem with our traditional housing stock, mainly in the centres of both Greenock and Port Glasgow. Now, obviously, in the document, it does mention the Eastern Gateway. It doesn't mention anything about, that I could see, and I could be wrong, doesn't I mention anything about the Greenock Centre survey that we're doing just now. So for me, it would be good to get some recognition of the problems we have in the centre of Greenock and some mention of that either in the SHIP document itself or especially in these papers. I think that's very important to the people in the centre of Greenock and Port Glasgow, because as we see all these new houses being built, we can see the centre of these big towns crumbling before our eyes. So I think it's important that we get that in when we're talking about our SHIP. Also, I think we're all delighted with 5.10 that they've finally got an acquisition programme up, and that probably ties in with my comment earlier. But what I would say with the acquisition, it's up to £2 million. It doesn't give us a period of time for that. I mean, £2 million could be 8 houses, and we don't know the period of time. So it'd be good to try and get a handle on that, because we know the problems that we've got, not only in the centre of Greenock, but in other areas, Belleville Street area, Port Glasgow Town Centre area, that amount of money could be ate up very easily within 6 months, really, and try to sort out some of the problems we've got there. So that would be my questions and my comments, Martin.
Thanks, Jim. Martin?
Thank you, through you, convener. Firstly, I think we've got to recognise that there will always be some tensions between the kind of the new build programme and what some of the other things that we want to do. And part of that's one of the things that the initial acquisition programme was set out to do. Now, we are well aware that maybe that Inverclyde could profit more from investment in more acquisition and more improvements of housing rather than new build. However, there's a tension in terms of not wanting necessarily for the money from the Scottish Government to go elsewhere. So, you know, we want to improve the overall quality of the housing stock. In terms of the Central Greenock study, I think that will be more useful in informing the local housing strategy, and that will then inform the SHIPs going forward. And I think also that the initial acquisition programme was also being run on a pilot basis, and we'll get feedback from Scottish Government, more homes, and we hope to actually expand it going forward, because you're quite right that that amount of money could quite easily be eaten up in relatively short order. One of the issues that we do have round about that, though, is current government rules about whether we can actually go to people, whether the RSLs can go to people and make offers for their houses if the houses have not been on the open market. And we're still waiting for the Scottish Government to resolve that, because that would assist the RSLs in actually progressing some of their sort of area improvement programmes where they've got owners who cannot afford to participate, who might be holding some of those programmes up. So I think, yes, I think we recognise the tensions, and I think also that the Central Greenock study, which will be due back from, it had to go back out to tender, you'll recall, and will be due back imminently, will be used more to inform the local housing strategy, which will then feed into the SHIPs going forward.
Can I briefly come back in? It would be good if we can reference that in our documents as well. But Martin, you know, if you're a resident in the town centre and you're seeing virtually it crumbling round about you, you would like to know that something's going to get done about it, and at least it's on somebody's radar. So it'd be good to reference that, and it would be good to reference about the acquisition, just to beef that up a bit, to actually say, well, okay, this is just a holding point, and this is what we're going to do in paper. So I'd appreciate if we could look at that, Martin.
So this is a draft for committee approval, so I'm quite happy if the committee wishes that to actually beef those areas up and put a bit more about that Greenock study in the SHIP prior to it being finalised with Scottish Government. It's not a problem.
Okay, thank you. Chris Curley, I'll bring you in, then I'll bring Jim in after that. Chris.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions in relation to what do you call it, the SHIP. We're obviously talking about this SHIP being revised. I know it's a bit presumptuous, but when will the next revision be? And it's one of the things that's coming up with respect to how all these documents interact, because looking at the local development plan, it talks about an unmet need by 2026. Well, I'll just look at the document, of 456 households for wheelchair accessible housing. So what I'm just trying to say is we've got an unmet need of 456. We're in 2022 now. That's 4 years. So we need to be effectively, to meet that need, we need to be building 114 homes approximately or thereby every year to meet that need. I'm just trying to see how this SHIP addresses that need. I know we've got the overall 5% target, which was agreed at committee. Obviously, we tried to get to 10%, but it was agreed at committee at 5%. So I'm just wondering, how does this SHIP address that unmet need from the social landlord perspective? Because obviously, as we know, there's probably going to be more of a need in social rented centre for wheelchair accessible housing than there may be, what do you call it, in private developments, because of the nature of a lot of these conditions that lead to need for wheelchair accessible housing. So I'm just wondering, how do we address that need within the SHIP, and how do we actually make sure this SHIP actually gets us, so we remove this, because at the moment it doesn't really provide any targets within this. And secondly, I do welcome the everything in the report. It talks about independent living. It's a small part of that, but is mostly talking about independent living when it comes to older people. And obviously, I think it's something I've been very aware of. We need to make sure we're providing independent living opportunities for younger people who maybe would need support to live on their own, and it wouldn't be appropriate for instance, to be in sheltered housing, older sheltered housing, etc. So how are we addressing that within the SHIP as well, to see how we're addressing a need? Because I'm concerned with people with younger people who have difficulty with living on their own for whatever conditions, etc. And I'm just seeing how we can actually develop and provide that sort of housing within our communities as well, as opposed to having them go outside. A good example, for instance, that was on the television recently was Patrick McGuinness was raising an issue with his children with respect to them having autism of different varieties, and he was worried about how they were going to look, how they're going to live in the future when they wanted to move out, but maybe necessarily would need a bit of support to do so. So I'm just wondering, and he went and visited quite a nice facility, it would appear. So I'm just wondering, have we got plans for that kind of facility in Inverclyde or something similar to help young adults who want to be able to live on their own but still need support?
Martin.
Okay, I'll try and take those one at a time. So first off, with the SHIP and when it's renewed, the SHIP is renewed annually. So in effect, the SHIP provides a kind of rolling programme with updates on projects previously authorised or previously approved, together with projects that are now in the pipeline potentially. And the SHIP will come back to you again in a year's time. In terms of the wheelchair accessibility, you'll note in section 6 that there's quite a lot of significant amounts of wheelchair accessible and various other types of amenity housing in some of the projects that are there, and there will be more in the new projects. For example, there's a potential project at the site of the old health centre, and it will include quite a bit of accessible and amenity housing. So the SHIP can't solve the total need for wheelchair accessible housing, because that's got to be cross-sectorial, but it will contribute quite significantly to it, and that will be built up over the years as we go on. In terms of the broader independent living, the wheelchair and accessible housing element was one of the first recommendations of the group looking at specialist housing provision, and they're also looking at other specialist housing provision. You'll note that one of the schemes involves some through care housing, but we'll be looking at all aspects of specialist housing, and we hope that that will report back this year and will certainly influence the local housing strategy. When we're talking about how these documents align, the local housing strategy is effectively your kind of 5-year look ahead as to what might be needed, and the SHIP is addressing that on a rolling programme basis. So the local housing strategy is probably the key document from that perspective, and we'll be taking forward any recommendations from that sector, and also be looking at any other needs that come up from the housing needs demand assessment, which should be coming out hopefully in February, looking at things in a bit more detail. So we hope to encompass all these things in the local housing strategy, and then that will be reflected going forward in the future SHIPs.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Jim, Councillor McLeod.
Yes, thanks, convener. Can I say that I welcome this report? There's an awful lot in it. There's a lot of very good things happening. I think over the last 15 years, we've seen a massive number of houses built, particularly houses, affordable housing for social rent in Port Glasgow and other parts of Inverclyde, which is very good. And a lot of the houses are obviously getting built to environmental standards and able to tackle many of the issues that it faces today, particularly around climate change and other things. So it's all to be be welcomed. Also, we know that 4 out of 10 people now are requiring one-bedroomed properties. That was a problem that we've identified in recent times, and so that there's more one-bedroomed properties being built for those people who only need one bedroom, which is good. But going back to one of the things as you know, I've campaigned for many years before I became a councillor, and I've obviously raised it many times within the council over the years that there hasn't been enough wheelchair accessible properties built. Now, I am very encouraged in this report that it mentions time and time again wheelchair housing in various locations in various estates, which is good, the new estates that are getting built. However, in many of the estates, it doesn't really, whilst it mentions wheelchair accessible housing, it isn't specific. It doesn't mention how many properties in some of the estates, albeit I know that in the table it's got some information in the tables. And again, it doesn't mention how many rooms. One of the things I've been raising before is about the number of bedrooms. Many of the properties, as we've seen at St Stephen's site, get built just now, and there is 8 properties, all one bedroom wheelchair properties. James Watt Dock, 8 properties there, again all one bedroom. And in many other areas, again, it's just one bedroom. Bay Street is one property of 41 properties that were built next to town centre in Port Glasgow, only one bedroom. It has to be recognised that there are disabled people out there with families. There are also disabled people who might have a partner or a husband or wife, and they can't share a bed or share a bedroom, so they need 2 bedrooms. And also there's disabled people who need carers who stay over. And also there are disabled people who need an additional room to keep equipment in their room in their houses, and that is why we have a 25% discount in council tax for anybody that requires that. So there's still an awful lot that needs to be addressed there, and going forward, I hope that these things have been addressed. I'd like to know more information about the number of properties that we are getting built over the next few years. How many are more than one bedroom? There has to be more properties with more than one bedroom, and so we need to. It'd be interesting if we could find that information out. The other thing is as well is about getting. I've raised this. I raised it 20 odd years ago about doing a mapping exercise to find out how many people are out there, how many wheelchair users there are in the district, and what sort of properties they require. And I still think we don't have that information. I mean, there was the census of 2011, the UK census, which showed that 1.9% of the population were wheelchair users. And if that is translated to Inverclyde, it would point that there's maybe 1,400 or 1,500 people who maybe use a wheelchair or a scooter, a power chair or whatever, sometimes during their days or whatever. So I think whilst it's good the things that are happening, there's still unanswered questions here. And because we've seen over 1,000 houses built in the last few years, I think there's 1,400, 1,500 houses built for social rent or affordable housing in Inverclyde. I don't know how many to date have been wheelchair accessible, but because of that, and we're playing catch up on this matter, myself and Chris had proposed, with the support of the SNP group, that it shouldn't be 5%, it should be 10%. And I would still like it, even if it was only the next few years, if we could recognise that and take it up to 10%. Thank you.
Okay. Martin, you want to kind of come back on any of them points?
Yes, surely. I'm more than happy to go back and get a breakdown of the number of wheelchair accessible and amenity properties, and the number of bedrooms in them. I mean, you'll note that one or two, is mention in one or two areas of places where they have, for example, Ravenscraig, where there are like 2-3 bedroom bungalows which are wheelchair accessible. But I'll get a more detailed breakdown for members and we'll get that circulated. I should probably also say though that the SHIP is just one part of this, the overall tapestry of this. The other part is obviously the scheme of assistance and the conversion of properties that people are already in, because people can be in properties that will not necessarily want to move and that can be converted easily. So that will take some of them. It's not all about new builds, but I'm certainly more than happy to actually get that detail.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Chris, do you want to come back in?
Convener, yeah, can I just say thanks, Martin, for that answer, and thanks for seeking out the information. I know what you're saying about the scheme of assistance and adapting properties. Sadly, though, in many cases, adaptations sometimes that have been offered to some people in the housing associations, if they live up and downstairs and perhaps they have a stroke or something else happens to them, sometimes they've just been asked to convert their living room into a bedroom, which isn't ideal. You know, who would want to sleep in the living room and whatever else, and have to wash on some occasions and whatever else in the living room. So that's, whilst it might be suitable for some people, it's not ideal for everyone. So, and again, it's also known about even the number of houses out there that can be adapted. How many are actually suitable? That information would be good as well. Thank you.
Okay, right, Jim. Okay, thank you. Chris, you want to come back in quickly? You're on mute, Chris.
Just touching on what's in the report about the difference in the terminology and how there's not a standard terminology. I think that's an important thing to try and get that bottomed out. Do officers know when we're going to get a standard national terminology for what all these things mean? And on the point about adaptions, it's one of the most difficult things when people are actually on the lists, is RSLs maybe will say, well, actually that house doesn't fully meet your requirements. We don't know if you're going to get the money to make that adaptation, so you can't bid for that property. So the more properties we can get that actually have the ability to actually take people first time is good. Another thing about adaptations, obviously, is a lot of times, a lot of these adaptations do get ripped out when somebody leaves a tenancy as well. So they're not really available, or they're no longer suitable for somebody coming in afterwards. So you can spend a lot of money adapting a home with a lift, etc. But at the time, if somebody's been in that house for 10 years, 15 years, by the time they then move on to different housing, the lift is no longer suitable, meets needs, and then the money has to be spent again. So it's better to get this in at the start. So first of all, just when are we going to get some sort of national standard? When you think we'll be able to feed that into our next housing strategy, and when and how do we then deal about the adaptations to existing properties, etc. So.
Sorry. On the national standard, I'll try and find out when that might be available. Obviously, it isn't at this point, but I'll try and find out if there is a point at which we will have that. In terms of the adaptations, I think that's a well-made point. Yes, sometimes they get put in, they get removed. I think the point I was trying to make more was that sometimes that can be an avenue for existing people not to have to necessarily leave their homes. What's probably important is that a large number of properties are built which have the sort of bedrock of being adaptable, as in wider doors, etc. And we're seeing certainly more of those come through the SHIP where they can actually be adapted further down the line, even if that's not needed at this point. So they should be easier and cheaper to adapt, and that's a key thing.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Okay, can we agree on recommendations? Agreed. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, moving on to item number 8, we've got the net zero strategy. Stuart.
Sorry, convener, it's Eddie.
Oh, sorry, Eddie.
I'll tell you that, thanks, convener. The report provides a summary of some of the initial pressures and challenges associated with the development and progression of an action plan. to address the drive towards net zero in the recently approved Inverclyde strategy. The two main areas of activity covered in the report relate to energy use in buildings and the decarbonisation of heating through implementation of lower emission alternatives to gas boilers, and the continuation of the upgrade to electric vehicles for the Council's car and van fleet. The actions proposed will allow us to look at the possible solutions to meet the carbon reductions required, and will inform the development of the wider costed action plan that we intend to bring back to committee following the summer recess. As can be seen from the information within Appendix 1, it's clear that this initial allocation will not allow for all of the properties to be addressed, but it will allow us to progress a number of pathfinder projects to inform the future direction and appropriate technical solutions that align with a longer term strategy. I would ask that the committee approve the recommendations and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Henry. Can we approve the recommendations? Yep. Okay. Thanks very much, Henry. Okay, item number 5 is the update report on Clune Park. Stuart, you take this?
Yeah, through you, convener.
Sure.
The report before members provides an update on the negotiations in respect of my remit from committee to try to progress the acquisition of further properties at Clune Park. Colleagues in the District Valuer's Office have continued to engage the large portfolio of landlords, and just before Christmas there appears to be some positive interaction with at least one of the landlords. I'm delighted to report there are now 24 new individual landlords expressing a desire to carry out transactions with the Council. Very much a holding report, convener, seeking to continue engagement until the 7th of February with legal commitments in place, and a further report to the March Committee on progress or next steps and the implications. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Graham.
Thanks very much, convener. Just to get clarification on 2.6, I think, or just a general bit mentioned in 2.6 regarding the district valuers. They will also be running under, they're working for us. I'm assuming they've got terms of reference from us. And is that terms of reference a publicly available document, or is it a contractual issue that obviously is not available to the public?
Convener, through you, what we've done, Councillor Brooks, is we've shared that document with the interested parties so that there's absolute transparency in what the terms of reference are. Clearly, the committee provided a direction that officers had to follow in respect of the negotiations with the district valuer, and that is being followed.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Thank you, convener.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can we agree recommendations? Yep, agreed. Thanks very much. Okay, item number 10 is a subject close to Councillor Clougherty's heart, the review of public conveniences. Martin.
Yeah, it's me again for my sins, convener. So this is simply an update on where we are following the various changes to public conveniences. As you're aware, the council took on the conveniences to a degree at Greenock Cut Centre and Lunderson Bay, and also is assisting in making the toilets at Battery Park available. The report basically is giving the overall costs of the current provision and is recommending that we'll come back to you with suggestions as to how this will be funded. It's likely to be, however, from the overall directorate budget, from within the overall directorate budget. It also, though, covers the trial period during which the toilets at Hunter's Place and Kilblain Street were closed at 6 p.m. We are to report back to committee on this after a year, and unfortunately the pandemic came along, so we didn't. Then, as you're aware, all the toilets were closed for a considerable period. However, what we are seeing is we're getting no obvious issues around about the toilets being closed at 6 p.m. and we would recommend continuing with that, but we're happy to bring back further updates in due course. We have had similar issues, unfortunately, in Port Glasgow with the toilets at 4th Street, and there's been a couple of incidents of vandalism, and I think there's been one very recently. And we are looking to use a similar means of managing that by closing at 6 p.m. This won't eliminate it entirely, but should mean that the toilets are available for most people who are using them when shopping, etc. And the the risk should be decreased. Now, it won't be removed, but it should be decreased. So we're recommending closing the 4th Street toilets at 6 p.m. as well. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Chris, you just got in before Councillor Cocherty, so...
Thanks, convener, and thanks, Mr. McNabb, for the report. I think we've always highlighted that one of the issues, I mean, Councillor Alfeld spoke about the gate issue, and there's an obvious cost to the council with these things, and there's a cost when it comes to opening and closing toilets, and the report doesn't quite cover it, so I'm wondering if I could just flush out some more information on the toilets at Cornelies. I think that there is an appetite from the trout fishery that they'd be happy to open and close the toilets, and that seems to me like it would free up some 1-2 hours of council staff time and cost. So could we not just come up with some sort of terms of reference or service level agreement with that business and just give them ownership of the key so that they can open and close the toilets for us, and then obviously we don't need to close them. To be honest, in the summer, ridiculously early, considering the amount of people that are still up there walking and fishing.
Martin?
So through you, convener, to a degree, I'll defer to Stuart on this one. However, I do know from historical involvement that this was looked at in the past, and there had previously been a suggestion that this could be done. And for reasons that I probably prefer not to go into here, we weren't able to progress that at that time, but that was some time ago, so I'm not sure if there is scope to revisit that.
Sure.
You, convener, since the council has become responsible for the direct management of the Inverclyde part of the Clydemuir Regional Park, we've been regularising a number of things with Argown Estates. One of the things which has been highlighted at Muirshiel is there is an opportunity there to improve the services, and once we get matters concluded with Argown Estates and where drainage goes, etc., that's something that we're prepared to look at with the fishery.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Jim?
Thanks, convener, and I hope Martin's answer was okay for Chris, and I hope he did manage to flush it out what he was.
I did pick up on that as well, quite good.
I'm sure he'll be able to answer my questions at his convenience. I suppose my point is, and Martin, I'm glad you've sort of clarified it, because we're in the darkest days of the year, right? And people are not out walking just now. And it is reasonable to maybe close the toilets at 6 p.m. at night. But as our lighter nights come in, the idea of keeping this under review, I think one of the problems, we spoke about it earlier on, there's very little traffic in the town centres or go by our public conveniences just now. So that the ability to do either antisocial behaviour or vandalism is there. But as the lighter nights come in and more people are walking about and more people are out and about, the instances of that, by the very nature, are a lot less. So I'm actually happy what Martin actually says, as long as that this is not a line in the sand, because we have put budgets in the past to increase the opening times of our local toilets because of, and Michael mentioned it, it was people like the Elderly Forum and other people who were saying, look, this is a big issue for more of the elderly people in the area. If they're out walking and they get caught short, and even people in their 50s, I'll put up my hand and say that, So as long as we are having it under review, then I'm quite happy with that. We get a report back, but I wouldn't want this just to be a line in the sand and say, well, you've agreed to a 6 o'clock shutting, especially Coronation Park, Hunter's Place, and other toilets as well. So I'm happy with the answer Martin gave us earlier on, that we'll keep this under review, and it'll be a result of papers coming back and saying, well, this is where we are this cycle.
Okay, Drew?
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, it's one of these subjects that as you get older, you pay a bit more attention to. And Jim sort of hits it right there when he says at 6 o'clock closing in the summers. It's quite ridiculous. Obviously, there's a cost attached to keeping them open, but if you're out and about later in the evening and you're caught short, where do you go? You go to a pub, or you go to McDonald's, or you go somewhere else, and that's not really the way it should be. And one toilet, Jim was just about there mentioning one toilet in each town, but I think we should be looking at sort of commercial possibilities as far as the toilets, and it shouldn't necessarily be a drain on the council, as it were. But if you go to some of some resorts, maybe like the one I'm thinking of at the moment is Keswick. Now, they've got a toilet there in their car park, and it's full of amenities, and they charge quite a substantial amount of money to use it. But if you're caught short and you're needing it, you'll pay that money accordingly. They don't have any vandalism. I'm sure the toilet possibly pays for itself, but that's something that we should be looking at now, as far as providing decent facilities, hygienic facilities, state-of-the-art facilities, and charging accordingly for it. These days of just producing or just maintaining and servicing the absolute basics are perhaps over, and people are maybe a wee bit more demanding of their comforts. And I think that's something that we should be looking at as far as on a sort of semi-commercial basis, at least for 2 or 3 other toilets within Inverclyde. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Drew. Graham?
Yeah, thanks very much, convener. Yeah, well, this whole conversation is kicked off regarding, the sort of vandalism or the criminal behaviour. I wouldn't even use the phrase antisocial. The criminal behaviour in toilets in Port Glasgow, and obviously we have got a recommendation here to close them at 6 p.m. Does our director or anyway our officers, do we have any knowledge of whether we've had Police Scotland, should I say, has had positive detection rates regarding these? Because obviously, if criminals are making us close toilets earlier, that's certainly not fair on our constituents. So Police Scotland and obviously our team to reduce antisocial behaviour, are they being successful?
If I can maybe come in on that,
Yeah.
I think there are a couple of very specific issues. So the issues round about Port Glasgow, there's currently quite a lot of ongoing work between Police Scotland and our teams, and we know that the problems are being caused by young people. And there was some discussion with the local area commander just this week about how we can target that better. I think one of the issues, though, round about the historical closures of Hunter's Place and Kilblain Street, was it's very, very hard to actually tell who's done this, because you can't really put CCTV inside the toilets. So even if we've got CCTV in the street, there is no evidence, there's never any evidence of who's actually carried out an attack. And the issues are basically that the vandalism doesn't only cost money, but it also takes the toilets out of commission for a number of days, so they're not available to anyone. And that was the basis that the 6 p.m. closures were predicated on. But yeah, it's very, very hard, because we can't easily put in any form of CCTV to see who's done this, to prove who's done it, even if we've got fair suspicions.
I fully understand, and understand the frustration of officers as well. But you obviously, challenging criminal behaviour must be our way forward. We must challenge criminal behaviour.
Okay, thanks, Graham. Chris, you want to come back in?
Thanks, convener. I didn't intend to come back in, but I just want, obviously, Councillor Mackenzie's basically made the point that he thinks we should be, well, he's took the pun game to a new level with a speech about spending a penny, but it did sound like he was wanting to bring in quite a more considerable charge for using public toilets. So I would be totally opposed to introducing a charge or a tax even on members of the public using what public conveniences. So I wouldn't want officers to take that as an instruction that they should be bringing back a report setting out commercial opportunities to start charging members of the public for using public toilets. I think they're quite within their rights to highlight the council tax that they pay, and if we can't maintain free access to public toilets, then we should be making the wider complaints we're making that the local government settlement isn't fit for purpose. If we've had to scrape the barrel that we need to start charging pensioners to simply use a toilet when they're out for a leisurely walk with their family.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I was starting to get worried with the item number 10 and Stephen hadn't made any comments, so I'm quite glad that you're coming in now, Stephen. Everything okay? You're on mute, Stephen.
I'm feeling a bit lightheaded today, convener, but this meeting's keeping me going. No, I just want to respond to Chris's comment. I don't think the officers take instructions from individual elected members. Officers act on decisions by committee, and if any member wishes to move, the officers bring forward a report on charging for public conveniences. They're able to do so. Wouldn't personally support it myself. I think on the basis that I don't think people would pay, to be perfectly honest, for attending public conveniences, because there are so many alternatives. I think that there is probably fairly limited uses of our public conveniences, but it is absolutely important we maintain them and keep them, because there are people who do use them, and the locations that they are locations where we tend to find people as well. I would wish that we would have high quality, top class public conveniences in this area. And quite a few years ago, when we decided to invest in our public conveniences and try and sort of maintain them when there was pressure to close them to make savings, we did invest a bit of money. But the simple truth of the matter is, unfortunately, if we invested lots of money in high quality public conveniences in this area, unfortunately we'd end up with even more costs of vandalism to maintain them. And I think that's partly why we've got relatively basic public conveniences, because the reality is, if we spent a fortune, we'd end up costing us a fortune.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Before I ask you to agree with recommendations, I'd just like to distance myself from some of them comments. We had flush, convenience and drain all thrown in there, so I'd like to distance myself. So can we agree with recommendations?
Convener.
Jim, okay, you come.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Yeah, I would, being one of the councillors for Port Glasgow, I'd like to make a case that for Port Glasgow 4th Street toilets, that we don't close 6 o'clock during this, particularly during spring and summer times, and perhaps early autumn, when the nights are much lighter. Mr. McNabb earlier on had said that the toilets are used by people when they're going to shops. That certainly is the case, and also there are people who go to bus stances who use the toilets as well. But the toilets, as many people will know, is just across from the Coronation Park. And during the pandemic, certainly there has been far more usage of the park, because a lot of people have not been able to get away with their families because of restrictions and going on holiday and what have you. So there has been more usage of the park. And sometimes when the weather's really good, it don't just finish up at 6 o'clock. They can be there to 7 or 8 o'clock. We also know there's a slipway there, and there's people with boats who come in and out of there too, again, who may need the toilet. My fear is if we close the toilets at 6 at Coronation Park, that some people might end up doing toilets or urinating elsewhere in the park or whatever, and I don't think that's a good thing if that was to happen. So one of the things that, when the toilets were vandalised, one of the first things I'd done was contact officers and asked them for CCTV and picked up on anything at that time. And I was told not really. And as Martin's explained as well, that sometimes you can't see, obviously you don't know who it is because they're inside the toilet when damage is occurring. So you don't really know. But I know certainly there's been other incidents in the town centre, new parish church, bins, some businesses bins been vandalised and setting fire, and also some issues at McDonald's as well. When I asked for an update last week from some antisocial behaviour officers, I was told that some youngsters have been identified and letters have been served on their parents, and indeed that the police have spoken to some of these youngsters in our schools. So I would hope that perhaps that's help nip some of that in the bud. There may well be connections between the toilets and the other incidents. So we must hope that happens. These incidents with the vandalism at Port Glasgow, there hasn't really been that many incidents over the years, other than the 2 or 3 incidents has been mentioned in more recent times. So hopefully will help to put a stop to that. But I would like to make a case certainly that Port Glasgow would perhaps be kept open till 8 or 9 o'clock in the spring and summertime. Okay, thank you.
Martin.
So I'm quite happy. I've already said that I will come back to you with how we are going to finance this. There aren't any financial implications to when we shut the toilets other than cost of damage. So really at this stage, I'm quite happy to bring something back briefly to the next committee. Maybe if we can have a wee look at what might be feasible, say between the months of April and September when there's longer evenings. And we'll bring that back to the March committee.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Okay, can we agree on recommendations?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, thank you. Okay, item number 11 is the 20-mile-per-hour speed zones. Gail, you take this?
Yes, thank you, convener. This report sets out the officer response to a motion agreed at council for officers to advise options for implementing a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit in Inverclyde and determining whether 20 mile per hour should be the default speed limit within the housing areas. The report sets out officers' assessment of the requirements to implement a 20 mile per hour in residential roads and that would be appropriate locations. The likely implementation cost is set out in 4.20 of the report, and the assumptions made by officers are advised in items 4.13 onwards. The total cost includes an estimate of costs for signs, lines, gateway features and traffic calming features. And the report goes into the differentiation about which would be suitable for which location. Officers have met with Police Scotland, as they are the enforcement body and also a statutory consultee. They have confirmed that on roads with an average speed of 24 miles per hour or less, gateway features would be sufficient, and they are happy to engage with how that gateway feature should look and where they should be installed. If 24 miles per hour or more, then it's required to have physical traffic calming on that road. In advance of any development of traffic regulation orders to promote a speed restriction, there is a requirement to carry out speed surveys. This allows officers to determine whether the current speed limit is either above or below that 24 mile per hour threshold. And the cost of the speed surveys are included within the report. The report also advises that following award of Smart Choice, Smart Places funding, there have been surveys carried out and are underway at all schools. This looks at encouraging active travel and sustainable transport to do that school journey. And a 20 mile per hour speed limit is a measure that can be used to encourage that change in behaviour. It's anticipated that those surveys will be assessed and the returns looked at in conjunction with the school community, and that if there is appropriate to have 20 mile per hour and the extent of that 20 mile per hour, a report will be brought back to committee in relation to that, and these would be promoted in year 23-24 if approved. This will be funded from Cycling Walking Safer Routes funding. In addition, the report requests approval to promote 20 mile per hour zones in our town centres and village centres. If approved, we would look to promote that in year 22-23, again funded through Cycling Walking Safer Routes funding. The service do not have a budget or funding available to deliver on the required speed surveys or implement the wider 20-mile-per-hour zones that's set out in the report through residential areas, and there are no other funding existing in the service or directorate at this time. I'm happy to take questions.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Gail. Graham?
Yeah, thanks very much, Convener. Yeah, a point and I suppose a question. Officers' recommendations at 4.25 proposing to implement the mandatory 20 miles per hour in our town centres and villages. I did note that Quarriers is missed out. So is that a decision of the officers not to implement this within the Quarriers village? That's my first question. Secondly, is more of a comment. The amount of street furniture that has on our roads in the last 30 years, maybe 20 years, could be classified as excessive. And I understand that officers have I don't know what the phrase is. I don't like the phrase a Bible to go by. I don't like that phrase, but I don't know an alternative phrase. I don't know if there's any leeway within it. Is there a maximum number of signage that has to go in, a minimum number of signage? Is there any leeway? Because the amount of street furniture on our roads, our pavements is excessive. And if this goes ahead, we're going to have millions of pounds worth of more street furniture. So is there a minimum that officers can implement?
Gail?
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor. In relation to Quarriers, the town centre and village centres that have been identified at this time are locations where there are pedestrian movement because there are shops in the area. There might be pedestrian generation because there's train stations or wherever it is encouraging that movement. And it's the movement of the pedestrians that helps reduce the traffic speed. So I can ask the team to look at Quarriers, but it wouldn't be in keeping with the locations that are moving forward in the first instance. In relation to street furniture, we do have a street sign manual, and that manual sets out the required distance between signage. So if we're putting in, say, a restriction for a time restricted parking or a speed limit, there will be a set distance required between the first sign and then the repeater signs. And we would require to write to the Scottish Government actually and Transport Scotland to deviate from that guidance, and which on occasion we do because of specific locations, specific reasons, but we do have a manual. We do though have a commitment to declutter. So if there was a location and we're putting in signage, we'll look to either pair up signage or we'll look to remove signage so that we aren't making it too difficult for drivers, because it can be confusing if there's too much signage and too much furniture in one location. So as we move forward, we always look to sort of declutter where possible, and it also reduces maintenance costs as well.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Decluttering sounds fantastic. I could give you a list of signs that I would suggest should be decluttered, but I would obviously go on your professional opinion. Just on Quarriers, a lot of the streets in Quarriers obviously don't have pavements, so there's a lot of pedestrians who walk on the road. And I just wonder whether that's a mitigating factor when it goes onto the main road within Quarriers, which there is a pavement, whether maybe that's a good reason we should drop it to 20, because pedestrians in a high percentage of the Quarrier village do walk on the road.
Okay, Chris.
Thank you, Convener. I think I welcome the direction of travel in the report. I must admit, I would like it to be more ambitious, so I probably will propose some changes to the recommendations later on in the discussion here. But I think it's important to try and get some points across and get some committee scrutiny first of all. I think from the point of view from the 20 miles per hour, looking at the costs, etc., and how we want to do it, I would certainly, from my point of view, I would like to give officers more of a steer. so they know what the end result is, where we're going, where the direction of travel is. So when we're designing these interim measures, or say these initial phases, which are say the town centres and the areas around the schools, that they know where the actual final result is, or where we actually want to get to. So I think it's important to sort of like have an eye in the future to see where are we actually going here. Is it where we're always just going to be talking about what the areas around schools or the areas around things, or we really want to have, in principle, we want to have the default speed limit in residential areas being that, and we'll work towards that. And I know there's the issue with budget, etc. But it's one of those things, if you it's what comes first, the idea for the money or the idea to get the money. I think it's important that we actually have the idea to get money, have the plan in place, and look to see how we can address the money and programme it accordingly. With respect to the costs, and they seem very large, and they are what you call, you almost fall off your seat. I'm just wondering, in your commentary, Gail, through your convener, you mentioned the fact is that the police requesting gateway signs and gateways to 20 mph speed limits, and this is increasing the cost. And obviously you mentioned the fact is if it's not self-regulating, you have to put in measures to make sure the speed is self-regulating, get it below 24 mph average speed, and that's why you would do the speed surveys. But I'm just wondering, is the police that you've been investigating here, is this advice that's on a national level in Scotland? Because when I look at how it's been implemented in Edinburgh, there doesn't seem to be any gateways, etc., when you're coming into from a 30 mph zone to 20 mph zone, apart from the mandatory signs that say 20 miles an hour. So I'm just wondering why in Inverclyde we've been told we need to have all this gateways, etc., for 20 mph speed limits, when in actual fact in other areas in Scotland it just seems to be is you put a 20 mph sign up if the speed is below 24 miles an hour on average, and if it's above that, it's you put a speed limit sign up, and you then do some traffic calming, whatever it is. So I'm just wondering, is there a lack of consistency in Police Scotland with respect to this? Because if there is, it seems to me that it has a huge impact on the cost for implementing these 20 mph limits, because our officers have worked out a value of £4.735 million for implementing 20 mph speed limits throughout Inverclyde, which wouldn't be all roads, but it's the residential and classified roads. Whereas Edinburgh have a report to Edinburgh from the October 2019 committee summarising where they've got to. It said that their costs were 2.96 million for the whole of Edinburgh. So I'm just wondering whether or not if Edinburgh can do it for £2.96 million and they've got it through Police Scotland, why, when we're talking to Police Scotland, Police Scotland suggesting measures that actually cost us £4.75 million, or sorry, £4.735 million?
Gail.
First of all.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, this is a national requirement. However, some local authorities will make decisions that, so the Police Scotland have said to us that they would, as a statutory consultee, they would object to a speed restriction that didn't have the necessary self-enforcement. So that's why each location is looked at as a particular location, because it requires the adequate self-enforcement to be close to the 20 mph driving. So Police Scotland have spoken to us. I met with them myself, and they were clear that they would object to an order that did not have that consistency in the local authority area. I couldn't advise whether a police officer in Edinburgh would have a different opinion, because we don't have that day-to-day engagement with those officers. The project in Edinburgh was signs and lines only, so that is where the cost difference is, in the fact that in Inverclyde we would be looking at gateway features and physical traffic calming where required. But with the looking at discussion with Police Scotland moving forward, we would look to be liaising closely with them. So we would be looking to reduce implications as much as possible, because it sort of reverts back to the decluttering discussion, in the fact that we don't want to put in any more infrastructure than is required. However, at this time, we do not have the budget available to carry out these speed surveys to be able to assess whether each location or particular locations would require traffic calming or not. So we're not able to have those in detail discussions with the local police.
Okay, thanks, Gail. Chris, you got something else you want to bring? You're on mute, Chris.
Yeah, I think it's just on this aspect of the speed surveys. I think the speeds. Well, it seems to me that we have £100,000 to do the speed surveys on the streets. First of all, how many of our existing streets have already had speed surveys done? And if you do the speed surveys, is there a best before date with the speed surveys, or is this a one-off cost that say that we could make a decision here today and say, well, as part of the budget, we can look at doing that, or what do you call it, we can remit it to what do you call policy and resources to try and identify £100,000. But what I'm just trying to say is, if we do that, and is it a one-off cost, or is it something that would have to be revisited in 5, 10, 15 years, and hopefully not as long as that. But if you know what I mean, what is the best before date in the surveys? And I think I still go back to the point is, I would accept there would have to be some traffic calming if there's excessive speed in particular roads that we want to apply 20-mile-per-hour route on. But I think if Edinburgh's managed to do it with just signs and lines, I think that's showing that what's possible. And I'm presuming there would have been objectives, etc. in Edinburgh. They've been able to make the case for using signs and lines in the vast majority of the streets that they have to put them on. So I'm just wondering why in Inverclyde we would be different, or if we really got here a very high value which we could hopefully start to pin it down. And I'm just trying to see how we can start having these conversations and move this forward, because where it seems to be going nationally is that there's a national working group to look at how we implement this at a national level, how we implement 20 miles per hour at a national level. And I want to make sure that Inverclyde, we can actually, if we decide in principle that's where we want to go, that we've actually done a little bit of the work so we can actually take advantage of this as we move forward post these two early implementations on the town centres, stroke village centres, and on the areas around the schools, which of course we haven't defined exactly how much of an area we're talking about around the school. Is it just the immediate vicinity of the school, or is it within the 1 kilometre walking distance of the school? That's not defined in the report. So I'm just trying to get a figure about how we actually move this forward. So first of all, what's the best before date, 100,000 lines, and how do we actually then engage with with Police Scotland to see about how we push this forward and how we phase possibly implementing this within Inverclyde, so we can take account of any national implementation of 20 mile speed limits in the next couple of years.
Thank you, Councillor. In relation to the speed surveys, we would usually do speed surveys annually to reflect if there's been any changes. In relation to the speed surveys that would be carried out to determine which roads could be, what the appropriate measure would be on each location, we wouldn't be anticipating, unless there was fundamental changes in the location, to carry those out annually. So the annual speed surveys that we usually carry out are on our key routes, so that we can assess whether there's any changes. So these would be new speed surveys, predominantly because they're in residential areas that are not on our annual assessment and monitoring list. So there's not an end date as such, but we would monitor. So if a speed survey had been done, if there was any changes to that location that we're aware of, that may require us to do a second or a third speed survey. But as normally, as a rule of thumb, if there's no change and there's no sort of fundamental changes to travel behaviour in the area, that would last probably for a period of 3 to 5 years. In relation to discussion with Police Scotland, I think it's probably something that needs to be national guidance, and I couldn't speak for Police Scotland about how they develop their sort of standpoint on enforcement and what's required for enforcement. They will have their guidance and their policies that reflect how they feed into our both liaison with ourselves, but also when we advertise traffic regulation orders as statute consultee, they'll respond, but they'll respond in relation to their national or policy standpoint on that. So I couldn't advise on when they change those policy positions, but it's something that through engagement, I'm sure that we can have those discussions and ask how they develop policy and when they would normally develop those policies and change them and make us aware of changes. And in relation to the school extent, the surveys that are being undertaken just now are not just location surveys where it's someone going out and an officer sort of looking at the location. It's also taking on board the feedback from pupils, parents, school community, but also residents in that area close to the school. So the extent would be determined on a location by location basis that we would look to promote. So what might work in one location may not be suitable for another location. Looking at where pupils walk, where they cross the road, where people park and stride. So it would be very locality driven, any option that we bring forward.
Okay, thanks, Gail. Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, convener. I just note the discussion about Corners Village and the back of the questions that have been raised in the comment in the chat. I think Councillor Brooks was probably referring to the main road through Corners Village because the main settlement's actually unadopted roads, and that's where the sort of speed bumps are. But just in terms of the report, there is one factual inaccuracy in the report, which is that this isn't a remit from the Environment Regeneration Committee. It's a remit from the full council on the 24th of September, where the motion went to. I mean, I'd like to commend officers for the work they've put into this report. There's been a lot, clearly, and I have to say, I think some of the criticism that's been in the press around the delay in officers bringing this report before committee is certainly not justified, to be perfectly honest. We've been in the middle of a pandemic since September 2020, so I just think we have to appreciate the huge demands that there have been on officers' time over this period. So I think they've done well to bring this report before us and provide us with all the information that's in the report. And clearly, I think it does give a sort of direction of travel in terms of the way forward. It might not be as ambitious as Chris seems to want it to be, but and maybe the costs potentially could be on the high side, who knows? But irrespective of what the actual cost turned out to be, to actually implement 20-mile-an-hour zones across Inverclyde is a huge project, which will take quite some time to do. And my group certainly is supportive in principle of increasing the number of 20-mile-an-hour zones. That was something that was in our manifesto, and we have seen some new zones in the time of this council, and we'd like to see more implemented. But I think we need to understand, as I say, this is a huge undertaking, and let's not believe that everybody in Inverclyde will be delighted about having their street as a 20-mile-an-hour zone, irrespective of whether there's speed bumps or no speed bumps in terms of the streets. And when we've seen before where there's been traffic calming measures, particularly in the west end of Greenock fairly recently, where we had objections and we had to have hearings as well. So there may well be objections to traffic regulation orders for 20-mile-an-hour zones. And I have to say as well, if we draw the parallel with the cycle lane, that we all seem supportive of in principle about the cycle lane when it was first muted, and we all seem to be very keen on active travel, and we all seem to be very keen on supporting this cycling fraternity in Inverclyde, and we had been lobbied pretty strongly by the cycling fraternity in advance of the sort of development of the proposals for cycle lanes. But when the going got a bit tough and the drivers started to complain about the impact on them and traffic speeds being slowed, etc., we weren't then all so keen about it then. So I don't think we should underestimate the size of the challenge in terms of trying to convert all Inverclyde residential roads to 20 mile an hour zones. I think this report is a good start in terms of moving this direction, but there is that big issue about funding, and it is something that's going to have to be considered in the context. Not necessarily have to say this budget, maybe the next budget, because we've got extreme pressures on capital within the context of this budget. But I certainly welcome the proposals and would be supportive of them.
Thanks, Stephen. Chris?
Thanks, convener. It's a very interesting report. It's well thought out, and I certainly endorse making as many residential areas, if not all of them, Inverclyde 20 mile an hour zones. Just want to, I guess, echo the comments of Councillor Brooks. It does feel that at times that the west side of Kempoke Street is probably the street sign capital of Scotland. So maybe we should take the street sign manual and put it in gold tablets and build a museum there, because I do think that, you know, if we ended up with that level of excess street signage in, you know, hundreds of streets, then I just think, you know, never mind the impact on the environment for putting all that cement into the ground to support the signage. I just think it would really ruin the public realm again. But I wanted to thank Ms McFarlane on the work that's been carried out so far on Clock Road, Albert Road, Ashton Road, etc. The speed surveys there, and it does show you the benefit of a street survey, because obviously the 95th percentile at every single survey point showed that people are driving over the speed limit, and of course that's the 95th percentile. It does suggest that probably, you know, as residents often tell me, and I'm sure Councillor Alfeld, people do drive along that stretch of road at 50, 60, you know, and some people claim that, you know, with the noise and the speed, it looks like they're going 80 or 90 at the small hours of the morning. So I'm really supportive of getting as many traffic calming measures in as possible. And I wondered if you would indulge me, convener, just on that specific point I raised at the end of Ms McFarlane could maybe give us a progress update at the next committee on, unless you could perhaps, I wouldn't want to maybe put her on the spot verbally today, but certainly a report at the next committee on where we are with that specific section that the speed surveys have been carried out, because the residents are really, it is upsetting a lot of residents. There's a great play park, Councillor Alfeld will be fully aware of, just along from where he is, that's barely used because parents, you know, fear you know, letting the kids run about in it in case they manage to get out on the road, because, you know, whether it's Amazon trucks that shouldn't be travelling that stretch, or the parked cars on both sides, the speed is so excessive. And I know those results certainly do justify, you know, I would like to see average speed cameras, which I know would be a considerable cost, but that would be my preferred solution, certainly some extra speed cameras. But I just wonder if I could hopefully expect a report at the next committee updating us on how we're going to progress that.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Gail, is that something we can do?
I'm happy to provide an update to members on the survey results.
Okay, thank you. John?
Thank you, convener. It's just to get Gail, just to clarify a couple of points in 4.12, where it's mentioned there that Branchton is a zone and it gives a list of all the roads on it. Yeah, I know that Pennyfern, where we have Pennyfern Road, Pennyfern Drive and Maple Road, where there is speed cushions, there's also build-outs in that area, and just wondering if that should be classified as a zone as well. Also, on the list, I noticed that there is Lady Alice Primary School, and should Gateside Avenue and Old Inverkip Road not be added to that list? And finally, there's one there in Port Glasgow, which is Broadfield Avenue, and we're just wondering, because there's speed cushions on Parkhill Road, Parkhill Avenue rather, should that also be added to the list?
Phil?
Okay, thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor. These locations are locations that already have a mandatory 20 mile per hour. So these are not ones that are proposed for 20 mile per hour. These are ones that already have that 20 mile per hour in place. So if the surveys were carried out on the wider roads in that network, the fact that they already have traffic calming should hopefully show that the current speeds in that area would be the 24 or less. So that would mean that the fact they've already got the traffic calming in place, they would likely only need gateway features. But the fact that they're not on that list is the fact that they're not currently 20 mile per hour speed limits. They'll be 30 mile per hour.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Jim, do you want to come in?
Yes, please, Convener.
Okay.
First of all, can I thank officers for bringing a report? I really welcome the report coming before us today. Positive in it, I think it's good that we're looking at village and town centres areas to be 20 mile an hour. I think that's particularly where there's a lot of pedestrians moving around these locations. So I think that's definitely a good move. I think many people will know my view about bringing it into residential areas, because many of our areas were built in the 50s, 60s and 70s at a time when there was few cars on the road. Now we see the volume of traffic, and in many cases there are 2 and 3 cars in a family. It's really not safe to be driving in residential areas, residential roads, faster than 20 mile an hour. I know certainly when I'm out driving, I'd never, I can't remember the last time I went faster at any point in a number of years in any of these roads. It's really not safe. We're doing things around active travel. We're trying to encourage more children to walk to school. We're trying to get less parents to park their cars around schools, causing traffic congestion, particularly in the afternoons when they're going to pick their children up. We want to make it a safer environment for children to be able to walk to and from school, to make it safe, to make, to give parents the confidence that will allow their children to walk to school. And we're trying to encourage more cycling, more walking, people to get healthier, get cars off the road. We know that 40% of car journeys are under 2 miles. We want to try and get people to use their legs more, those that are able, and certainly to cycle more. And that has all sorts of health benefits too. So I just feel it's the right thing to do. I think it's to reduce speed is to reduce reduce the numbers of fatalities and injury. We know where there's a fatality that can, as well as causing the personal grief for the family and others involved, that there's also the financial cost at over £2 million to look into any fatalities. So there is a cost to that too. But I just think we should be doing this, and we should be making every effort to do it. I know certainly it was in the SNP manifesto in 2017, and it was in the Labour manifesto as well to do this too. So I would hope that we make every effort. Regarding funding, I can understand it. I think Chris Curley's already made the case, that Edinburgh were able to do it for £3 million, and that's a much larger area with many more roads than what we have. I just wondered if officers had contacted Edinburgh or any other local authorities in Scotland or elsewhere where they've already carried out a 20 mile an hour policy in our residential roads, to see how they've done it, how they've managed it, and the cost, how they were able to keep costs down to a minimum, to see if there's anything that we could learn or do there. I'm disappointed that if the police in Inverclyde are saying something different to perhaps police elsewhere, because as we all know, it is a national Scottish police force. So I would hope that what's getting said to planners and to roads officials in Edinburgh would be similar to what is getting said here. I think it's maybe something that needs to get looked at. But I just think moving forward, we should be making every effort to do this and bring in the residential areas. I would hope that we would do that and we get support. But it needs a political will across the board to do so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, thanks very much. Any other member want to come in? Chris, do you want to? I see you've got
Yes.
recommendations in the chat.
Thank you, Michael. I think what basically what you do is, I say, reiterate the comments I think you made at the start, that I do welcome this report. I think it's getting there. I say I would like it to be more ambitious, and I think people would understand that I've been consistent in that approach. And I think looking at it, I think there's a way to try and get that ambition in the recommendations without us, what do you call it, looking at costs. I think, for instance, when we're looking at what streets we should be doing surveys in, obviously we need to identify what streets we think should be 20 mile per hour, and then do the surveys in the streets. So we don't put surveys in all the streets, but we've got officers identify what streets they think, if you're doing residential streets, what streets should be 20 mile per hour, and then do the surveys on then, and then we can sort of like, they're cutting back the cost of doing the surveys, and also the cost of any sort of traffic management, etc., or traffic calming. So the proposed text, I don't know if everybody can read it, or do you want me to read it out? What I'm basically saying is, what I'm basically saying is, let's start the principle. Let's move for the call for saying we're going to do it. I think what officers are proposing with the phasing, with doing round town centres and round the schools, is a good way to start. But what I would suggest is, if we're looking at the schools which are in residential areas, I think it would aid officers if they knew what the end game was. The idea is we're going to look at maybe having what they call a complete area, residential area, 20 mile per hour. So when they're putting the speed limits and the signs and lines up for, say, a school in that residential area, it might change slightly where they're planning to put these lines, so we don't have to revisit it in the future, signs in the future. So I think that gives them that steer, so they know what the end game is, and that maybe will also, what they call it, save us costs in the long term, looking at the direction of travel with 20 mile per hour speed limits within residential areas. And it does have a big impact with the speed limits. If you reduce an average speed limit by 1 mile per hour, the studies have shown that you reduce your accident rate by 6%. That's a big impact. And also what we're saying, I think it's very important to make clear to everybody in the committee is, we're not saying that every residential road in Inverclyde has to be 20 mile per hour, or indeed every road in Inverclyde has to be 20 mile per hour. We all would recognise roads we think should stay 30 mile per hour or even 40 mile per hour, so that we can get people moving throughout Inverclyde. But when we get down to the local level in people's housing estates, where we've got parked cars, etc., where we want to make sure that people have got the chance to go out, play safe, walk safe, and travel safe, we need to make sure that we're getting the speeds down in these areas. So this is what we're proposing. So if I read it out, if that's okay, convener?
Yep.
3.1, the committee agrees to deliver a default 20 mile per hour speed restriction within residential areas and town and village centres, and this will be implemented in a phased manner. The committee agrees that the first phase will be delivering a 20 mile speed restriction in key pedestrian generated areas, with 20 mile speed restriction delivered in town centres and villages in 2022-23, and the village and schools in vicinity of village and schools in 2023-24 or earlier if possible. That to be remitted to the Head of Service, Roads Environmental Services, and into my Head of Legal and Domestic Democratic Services to prepare and promote a TRO to install mandatory 20 mile per hour speed restrictions in town and village centres in 2022-23, and then around schools in 2023-24. And these will be funded for cycling, walking, and safety roads. 3.4,
the committee agrees that officers will develop a plan for 20 mph speed limits on residential roads throughout Inverclyde, which also identifies those roads to remain at 30 to 40 mph. To inform the phased implementation, 20 mph speed restrictions, a new prioritisation policy scheme is to be developed to score and rank areas, and that to be remitted to this committee for approval of the prioritisation policy scheme and further phases of 20 mph speed restrictions, including public consultations and any potential cost implications. So as you can see from those recommendations, what we're basically doing is tweaking what officers are currently proposing, but putting in the end direction. Effectively, what we're suggesting is let's agree where we want to get to, and then we can move forward on that basis. But that the further stages will be with the approval of further committees for looking at how we do this, looking at the costs of doing it, and how we have to consult with the public, because as I think Stephen mentioned, it's important that we bring the public along with this as well, because we need to make sure we do improve public consultation when we're doing this sort of stuff, because if we don't, there will be a big kickback. But I think that's what we propose as our amendments to recommendations. I think it's working with what the officers were planning to do, but adding a bit about what the end game is. Thank you.
Right, okay. Thanks very much, Chris. Peter, do you want some clarification on one of Chris's recommendations?
Thanks, mute button again. Yes, thank you, convener. Just there was one and this is going to sound like the lawyer dancing the head of a pin again. Obviously the office's original recommendation talks about the principle of delivering a 20 mph speed restriction, but the councillor's recommendation is that agrees to deliver that default restriction. We obviously need to take account of the statutory processes that would need to be followed. So I would encourage the inclusion of the word principle in there still, and there's also potential budgetary considerations.
No, I'm quite happy to think that in. I did have that in there, and I thought, well, was it maybe superfluous? But I'd take the dancing the head of a pin, legal dancing the head of a pin requirements.
So you content that therefore agrees to the principle of delivery of a 20 mph speed restrictions, subject to necessary statutory requirements and budgetary. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Stephen, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to come in on that point. I mean, Peter's obviously provided some helpful advice to Chris in that, and I think that was the missing factor, that we don't have the money for this at this point in time, and obviously there does have to be consultation. But fundamentally, if we're talking about dancing on a pinhead, I think the difference between the recommendations in the report and the amendments from Chris is a bit of dancing on a pinhead.
Okay.
I would disagree a bit, Stephen, because I think the report's silent on some of the sort of issues. But I think, as you can see, that there's a lot of what's in the current recommendations that I would like to proceed forward. But it's just that the end journey. I'd like to try and get stated it explicitly rather than maybe implicitly. It's been in the report at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, Stuart.
Convener, through you, clearly Councillor Curley's aspirations are laudable, but the problem that we've got is we don't have the budget, as has been highlighted on a number of occasions, and it wouldn't be appropriate for us to set timescales when we don't have a budget for this project.
Okay, thanks, Stuart.
If I could come in on that, just on that aspect, we aren't setting timescales for the subsequent phases of the what do you call it, the works. We're keeping the timescales that are within the report with the funding that's been applied for, but it's the in principle that we want to move towards that, and it's how we get to that is where we look for getting the budget and looking for getting the approvals in future years.
Convener.
Jim, I'll bring you in a minute. Stuart, do you want to come back in?
Convener, clearly Councillor Curley's paragraph 3.2 doesn't suggest that it is subject to budget, and that one in particular does give me cause for concern, because it does make reference to the 22-23 budget. There has been no part of this been introduced in the budget setting process for the next financial year We all know the challenges that the council faces in the next financial year and the following financial year, and it would be inappropriate, I believe, to put these timescales on these conditions.
Thanks, Stuart. Stuart, come in.
I think this may be if that's where Stuart's concern is. What I'm trying to do there is actually really paraphrase what was in the original recommendations. So if there's another word that can be written in there, because I'm just looking at it thinking,
Jim, do you want to come in just now where Chris is kind of thinking about his wording?
Oh, I know it's not so much that. I'm just wondering what's the difference between the wording here and what was in the
I'm going to let Jim come in.
Yeah, no problem.
Can you come, Jim?
Yeah, Convener, I did ask earlier on, Gail, if we had spoken to other local authorities who have introduced 20 mile an hour, and what I would ask is, one of the things we could be asking them is how did they achieve this? Did they get funding from other sources, Scottish Government or otherwise? You know, if we could find that information out, because these other authorities must have been asking and had similar concerns to what we've got. So it would be good to find out how they managed to get things carried out.
Yeah.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor. There has been some conversation, and we actually met with, I won't say Dumfries and Galloway. They did a presentation to Scots not long ago, and we had a discussion with them about it. So we have had some discussion that has fed in to our report and our thinking in some way, but happy to continue those discussions, and I actually have a Scots executive group meeting tomorrow, and this has representatives of all the local authorities, roads and transport teams on it, so I'm more than happy to raise it at that.
Okay, thanks, Gail. Chris,
That'd be great, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Chris, you want to come back in to finalise?
Yeah, I must admit, the original 3.4 is based on 3.2 and the 3.3. So I'm happy to take out any reference to timescales in 3.2. So if this has got officers think that's a bit of an issue.
Stuart?
Convener, the committee have been advised on a number of occasions that we have a very, very limited budget for these works. You'll recognise that we've been using CWSR money to carry out surveys and implement the works around schools. That's not a core council budget, it's CWSR monies. The aspirations that Councillor Curley has identified is far more than that, and on the basis that we have these very limited funds, we're carrying out surveys. We've identified that there's £100,000 worth of survey works to be carried out. I understand where Councillor Curley is coming from in respect of the figures between Inverclyde and Edinburgh. I don't know, as Gail has already alluded to, they've only done a sign and line exercise as opposed to carrying out a more comprehensive exercise, which has been identified by my officers. And the only thing that I can go with at this moment in time is the budget costs identified by my officers. And I would be delighted if the value was to come down. But we don't have £1 million to do this, never mind £3 million to do this. And it's because of the ambitious targets which have been set out in Councillor Curley's recommendations. I would feel that it would not be me doing my job were it for me to point out the concerns that I have in respect of available budget for this exercise.
Thanks, Stuart. John Crowther, do you want to come in?
If I could, thank you, Convener. What I was looking at is, instead of the possibility of putting like hard and fast dates, would it not be preferable then to put with a target date of? That means that there is an element of flexibility there, and if there is slippage, it just gets reported as slippage.
Stuart, you want to comment on that?
Through you, Convener, target dates, it's still about aspirations, and I come back to we don't have a budget. At no time during the budget setting process for the forthcoming year has this issue been raised as a potential burden on the council's budget, and it's for that reason that I'm extremely nervous about including any target dates.
Okay. I think we need to move on here. I'll tell you where I am.
Sorry, Michael. I understand you want to move on.
Chris, I'm going to let you finish
Yeah,
off. Okay, we've given you a fair bit of latitude. Then you come.
No, it's just to say that the target dates, dates I've put in here, the dates for implementation are exactly the same dates that are in the report here, and it's only for the 2 phases or the 2 items of work that are in the original report. There's no dates, there's no budget, etc. For the rest of it is an aspiration that we want to move towards, and that will be determined by future committees. All the budgets and all things are within the existing report recommendations.
Okay, well, I'll tell you where I'm at with it. I think it's an excellent report. I think officers have done really well bringing it together. I don't agree with Chris that we're tweaking this report. I'm worried about the budget going forward, and for Chris to say that we can move forward without looking at costs really worries me. So without going on, I'm going to move the recommendations in the report from 3.1 to 3.4.
Convener.
Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, just the point I'd put in the chat. Is that okay then? That doesn't need
I was going to actually bring in at the end. Yeah, I'll bring that in. Maybe Gail can agree to bring the report back on the traffic calming Ashton, Albert and Clock Road, Gail. Okay, but I would like to move the recommendations contained in the report.
Okay, through you, convener, then, member. So, Councillor Curley, for your motion, we had talked about introducing conditions regarding the identifying necessary budgets and following statutory processes for your 3.1, and that you'd agreed to the dropping of the time limits from your 3.2. Apart from that, can we treat what you put in the chat as being your motion?
Yes, that's will be my I'll go for amendment. You go for a motion, Michael.
Convener, point of order.
Peter.
Just confirm, is Councillor Curley happy to include what you included in the end in terms of bringing that report back in his as well?
Yes, I was just going to add that, and Chris, that I would add in your commentary about about Albert Road, Ashton Road, and Clough Road at the end of mine as well. So both would be neutral with respect to that.
Fine. Okay. So are members content with that, or do they want me to read through the body of the text?
Content.
I see shaking heads. Councillor McCormick, your amendment is that the recommendations are as per the report, subject to the addition of Councillor McElhenney's request for the additional report on the future report rather on Albert, Ashton and Clough. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
just to confirm, mine's is the motion.
Yes.
Here's the motion, and the convener's is the amendment. Correct. Let me just check my notes here for a second. Okay. Okay, so if I can run through the members one at a time and ask you to indicate if your vote is for, I'm going to be careful with this, Councillor Curley's motion or for the convener's amendment. Councillor Alfeld.
Amendment as per the report with the GUROP position included.
Councillor Brooks.
Amendment.
Councillor Clockerty.
Amendment.
Councillor Crowther.
Motion.
Councillor Curley.
Motion.
Councillor Jackson.
Convener's amendment.
Councillor MacLeod.
Motion.
Councillor McCabe.
Amendment.
Councillor McCormick.
Amendment.
Councillor McElhenney.
Motion.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Amendment.
Councillor Nelson, right, so I think we have you all. So we have 4 votes for the motion and we have 7 votes for the amendment. So the convener's amendment is carried.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, moving on to item number 12, pontoons in Inverclyde. This is a response to council's questions. Stuart, you want to take this?
Thanks, convener. Councillor Brooks sought information relating to the pontoon in East India Harbour. I'm afraid the report does not make good reading. The principle behind this project remains sound. A pontoon for visiting vessels to tie up to afford the passengers to get access to the town centre and for the provision of facilities. However, it's clear from circumstances involving antisocial behaviour, management which could have been better, and the pandemic have resulted in a less than ideal situation. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Stuart. Graham.
Thanks very much, convener. Yeah, obviously, welcome Stuart's comments that it is a disappointing financial outcome, and I certainly would like to see, obviously, the leisure industry increase and for Inverclyde to grow the leisure industry, and the Clyde is a great playground for leisure as well as industry, but a great playground for leisure. So disappointed that the figures have come out, which they have, and I suppose my research looks at what one vessel that was berthed for most of the year. If I had gone to the local marina, the neighbouring marina, I wouldn't name it obviously, it'd been a cost of 7k. So there's obviously something gone quite wrong. I think our income is 1,045. So there's something not right. So is it the fact that local authorities shouldn't be, running pontoons? Is it really for the third or private sector to make these things happen? I know we have a contract out. It's named in the report, so I'm assuming I can name it to Marine. So is something's obviously gone wrong. The average costs. I know that the report gives us what's happened, and we understand the pandemic. The report's also given us the sort of top line costs that could have been income. I think it was 10,500. We add on the insurance. I think a medium figure for me, if I'll be realistic, and hopefully all members would agree, is about 9,000. So what would £9,000 buy us? Well, as I looked at our expenditure, that's around about the money we spend on the recruit programme. So we could double our education recruit programme if this facility wasn't costing us what it is. So I would just like to, I'd like further comment from officers to think about how can we obviously solve this problem. If officers agree it's a problem, or more importantly, the members of the committee agree it's a problem, how could we move forward? Do officers have a proposal of how we can solve this problem? Because money is an issue. I know Mr. Councillor McCabe might say it's a small amount of money, and I agree that, but members budget working group is looking to find some small amounts to solve the problem. How can we invest in our leisure industry but do it better for the taxpayer?
Through you, convener. Clearly the aspiration of this pontoon is to make Inverclyde attractive to visiting vessels. I stand by the fact that having that facility within Inverclyde would be beneficial to Inverclyde. I think in order for that to happen, the first stage in any process is that we have to remove the vessels which are currently there. That is not a quick fix. It's not just a case of we can go in and pull them away. I've discussed this with colleagues in legal, and it is fraught with difficulty. So on that basis, Councillor Brooks, my proposal would be for me to bring a further report back to members, identifying what the proposed course of action would be and what the timescale associated with that would be. I don't have a quick answer for you, and I'm afraid that that's something that I can't provide you.
Convener, I'm very happy with Stuart's answer. I know the whole directorate is under pressure financially and management of time, because we've lost some key workers. So I appreciate Stuart's commitment for a future report. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Chris.
Thank you, Convener. It's a strange one. This I welcome what they call it. Graham's bringing this to what they call it to attention, because it's something that maybe goes under the radar, but it's raised quite a lot of issues. I'm just wondering how does this work? So we Riverside, Inverclyde presumably, or ourselves, own a pontoon in the middle of effectively a harbour, and we're charging for people to tie up our pontoon. But do we pay rent to the harbour for having the pontoon there? And also, does the boats have to pay twice? Do they pay twice to get into the harbour and twice and another time to what they call it, to hang up our pontoon? I'm just wondering how the whole thing works and how we can actually make money. And I do think it's probably something that's better. But I do agree. It's probably something that's better managed with in the sort of the private sector, or somebody who's watching it daily and maybe not hourly, to see who's actually what they call tying up at the pontoon and coming down there, giving them a ticket and giving them things so they actually pay their money before they tie up. I think the issue is you're right, is once a boat's there, it's very difficult to get it rid of. We had a bridge we were fixing, well, maybe I shouldn't mention that, but a bridge locally where there was actually the local boating fraternity had actually taken to actually tying up around the bridge piers, which made it very difficult to actually do the inspections and do any repairs to the bridge. So it's a very strange situation, and hopefully what they call it, officers gives some additional information to my questions.
You want to try and clarify things for Chris?
Through you, Convener, it's clear from the income stream, Councillor Curley, that certainly boats aren't paying twice for anything. You could argue that they're not paying for anything at all because of their antisocial activities. I think these are valid points, Convener, and it's certainly something that I'm happy to bring back in the report to the future meeting of the committee.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Okay, John.
Convener, in respect to the pontoon, it was actually put in that location with the best of intent, and I would, like everyone else, would love to have seen it being used more often. I know that we were through a period of the pandemic when vessels were tied up, and that may have some sort of impact. I also noticed that there is notice on both sides of the jetty just saying that it's a private pontoon, and I've been told that some owners have come in, saw that, and then about turned and went straight back out the harbour. Therefore, that private notice there has actually been detrimental in many respects. The authorised berthing of vessels, that has been ongoing for quite a long while, and it probably goes down to, at the end of the day, as a management issue, and it looks like that this whole project has been beset by that almost from the word go. I know that if vessels had broken down, the RNLI would tow them quite often into the pontoon itself, and then you discovered no one had keys, and that was a problem. I understand that the RNLI eventually did get a key for it, as did the local Coast Guard. So at least that helped that if vessels did come in, that at least that they could get access to the shoreline. The problem we also had as well is that I had visited there, and from time you would see fishing gear discarded on it, the bedingis on the actual pontoon. There was fuel drums on the pontoon at one stage, and if there's any leakage there, that could become a potential death trap. And it does mention there that there was at least one, well, it says that there was a number of vessels, and it also points towards the local boat club. I think they were only one member anyway, did have their vessel there for a substantial period of time, but I'm sure that was simply because it went unchallenged, and that there was other vessels that were using it, not paying, not being challenged, and that just led to other vessels doing the same. And I would like to see that the management issues are actually checked, that we can draw up a better management agreement, because I think that the pontoon should remain there, and hopefully we will start to have a much greater financial return. The other wee bit there about the finances is that I understand that the agreement is that there's a share of, or a pool of the finances, and where there's any profit made, that would be shared with the likes of Peel. If we are sharing the profits with Peel, why are they not picking up some of the charges that are incurred by Inverclyde Council?
Stuart.
You, Convener. Councillor Crowther raises a number of valid points. However, without wanting to go into the specific issues, there have been, as I said, antisocial behaviour, which included threats to the management when people were asked to move from the pontoon. When it comes to this facility was not put in to make profit. This facility was simply put in as a benefit to the visiting community for those coming to Inverclyde. So where I'm certainly not aware of the profit sharing agreement within Peel, and that's something that I'm happy to investigate as part of the preparation of the report going forward.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Thanks, John. Who else was on? Jim.
No, it's okay, Michael. Nothing further to add.
Right. Okay. Okay. Can we agree the recommendations? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. This is obviously John's part of the agenda. So item 13 is the naming of the boat ramp immediately west of Gourock Pier Head, and it's a request by Councillor Crowther.
Thank you, Convener. I have supplied as much information on this as I possibly could, but there was one small part that I did omit and possibly should have included, and that really is part that I will address now, and hopefully that I can address it satisfactorily to everyone, and that goes down to the ownership of the slipway. And should I wear my water safety hat, I'd also note that the waters adjacent to the slipway are within the statutory harbour area, which is under CMAL's responsibility. Now, I did a check on the ownership there of the slipway, and that was part of the Gourock Waterfront project, which was completed in January 2016 at a cost of 5.2 million by Riverside Inverclyde on behalf of Inverclyde Council. And therein, I believe that the ownership of the slipway is that of Inverclyde Council, and I did supply information to that effect to Stuart. And I hope that that would be to his satisfaction. This actually is a very important question to the right of the slipway, because if you neither have title to it or have secured the explicit owner consent of the owners to do so, it does raise problems. In respect to the ownership, I initially contacted CalMac as I'd noticed from documentation from them that come under the title Gourock Harbour Users Consultative Forum, that CMAL actually delegate a vast majority of the operation of the harbour to CalMac Ferries. That is under the Harbour Operating Agreement, and it is in accordance with this that I sought their guidance and advice as to whether the slipway in question was within or out with their statutory harbour area. The advice that I did receive is that the location of the slipway has been cross-checked against CMAL's ownership in their master plan, and it would appear that while the slipway certainly sits within the statutory harbour area of CMAL's responsibility, it sits out with CMAL's land ownership. During this interaction with CalMac, I very much welcome responses that I received from them. Cameron McPhail, who's the head of the ports and harbours of Calmac Ferries, he stated that this is a fantastic proposal to acknowledge Robert's life and the services of the Ritchie family. And Robbie Drummond, the managing director of Calmac, the story is an interesting piece of local history of which I was unaware, and this seems a very nice tribute. Now, if I move on to the name Ritchie Slipway, though that the naming is for a slipway, it also complies with Inverclyde Council's own road naming and numbering guidance, insofar as the proposed name is associated with the site and the area in which it is located. It accords with past uses of the site. It is also for a family associated with the area. Furthermore, the name of the slipway is easy to pronounce and spell. The last living member of the Ritchie brothers, ferry masters Robert Arthur Ritchie and Walter Roy Ritchie, are now deceased. The proposed name is not used in Gourock, nor is there any adverse connotations, nor is it obvious that it could be deliberately misinterpreted. And finally, the suffix is self-descriptive and accurately reflects the purpose for which the slipway will be primarily used. I would ask members to take cognizance of this additional information to support my members' request to name the slipway Ritchie Slipway in memory of Robert Arthur Ritchie, the last of the Ritchie brothers ferrymaster, and for a suitable informative plaque to be positioned adjacent to the slipway. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I'd like to kind of commend you for the work you've done with this, John. It was an interesting read. Ronnie, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Maybe I could say make one or two points about this. I think, first of all, I would very much welcome John's proposal here, and I would congratulate John for an absolutely outstanding proposal. And I would also like to thank John for advising me and discussing with me last month about the whole project. I think it's absolutely fantastic. The Ritchies are synonymous with the river, with ferries and with Gourock. However, convener, I have to say that I wondered if I should declare an interest in this, because my own father was Robert Ritchie Alfield, and my grandmother was Margaret Ritchie. So maybe I'm a bit biased. There are quite a number of Ritchies in Gourock, and some debates over the years about who fits in where, and I won't get involved in that. However, the oldest town records, John referred a wee bit to the history of the town. The oldest town records refer to a James or John Ritchie, whose gravestone is in the old Gourock cemetery opposite Eastern View. And there are reports of Mr. Ritchie trying to save and sadly bring bodies ashore after the comet sinking off Gourock in 1825. Indeed, if you're passing this old cemetery, you'll see an obelisk, and that's a memorial to those who perished in that disaster. The first records of the Ritchies, the river and Gourock was that one. When John was carrying out his research, he actually asked me if I knew that the Ritchies were good footballers, were outstanding footballers, and that they'd actually played for Morton Juniors. I did know that because my father was the goalkeeper for Morton Juniors, and I have his medals in the house. And 30 or 40 years ago, I was asked by Jimmy Simpson, the great Jimmy Simpson, excuse me, the editor and owner of the Old Gourock Times, if I would write a series of articles about football in Gourock. Now, one of the old reports I read about Morton Junior said, and I quote, "Alfield saved the penalty and Ritchie scored the winner," and that was at Capello. And all of them came from Gourock High School FPs who actually played in the park that's now Gourock Primary School. Finally, convener, there's a major story to be written about the Ritchies ferries, one being that they basically played a major part in getting American sailors across the river back to ship at the time of the Cuban crisis. But that's for another day. John has mentioned that a suitable plaque be positioned at the slipway, and I'm aware of some offers to contribute to the cost of that I'll happily pass on to John. So it's an appropriate place. It's opposite the slipway because our iconic statue of our favourite Gourockian, wee Annie, getting ready to go down the water on a ferry, overlooks the slipway. And I think it's great work for John. It's great work for the Richies. Fairies and Gourock are all synonymous with one another, so I'm absolutely delighted to support and to congratulate John on a brilliant project. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Ronnie. Stuart?
Yeah, thanks, convener. Defer to Councillor Crowther's excellent work. We have investigated, and there is a 99-year lease on this land. So therefore, could I ask that if members are minded to support the report, for the sake of completeness, that the following recommendation be added: that delegated authority be granted to the Interim Director Environment Regeneration to seek any necessary landlords or other consents in terms acceptable to the Chief Financial Officer and Interim Head of Legal and Democratic Services.
Thanks, Stuart. Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to actually come in, I suppose, in relation to the point that Stuart's just made there. I mean, absolutely everybody commend John for the work he's putting into this. He obviously did share some additional information verbally to us, but I mean, what we've got before us is a member's request without any officer, I suppose, commentary or advice with respect to it. So certainly there seemed to be some potential dubiety over the ownership of the slipway there, but with Stuart's sort of additional recommendation, assuming everything checks out properly, I think I'm more than happy to support in principle the request from John.
Okay, so happy to support John and agree the recommendations.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Well done, John. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 14. We've got the Property Assets Management Report. It's a public report on public open space consultation relative to Rankin Park in Greenock. Stuart?
Convener, it's Eddie.
Sorry, Eddie.
Thanks, convener. As you've just stated, the report summarises the outcome of the open space consultations in relation to the proposed indoor tennis development at Rankin Park, with the most recent one required due to the change in the proposed location within the park. The appendices include the detail on the responses with a summary within the body of the report and the input from the various council services to the points raised. The committee is requested to provide a decision in respect to the proposed change of use for the construction of the new facility. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Eddie. Ronnie?
Thanks again, Michael. I'll need to get a glass of water, I think. Maybe some comments on this one. A bit of background. A number of years ago, I visited Strathallan Indoor Sports Centre to see at first hand the tennis facilities. And this was a result of a request from, excuse me, the local tennis community to provide an indoor play area. I had presented prizes at the local tennis association for 3 or 4 years, so I was well aware of the demand locally for indoor tennis facility. And on that trip with me were representatives from Inverclyde Leisure, Tennis Scotland and the local tennis reps. It was a really great fact-finding trip, especially to see the facility where the Murray brothers and other leading Scottish players had practiced. But after we watched the match and discussed a lot of relevant details, the tennis areas were being set up for a 6-a-side indoor hockey match. And my enthusiasm for the project of this nature was knocked back a bit when subsequent discussions with LTS indicated that grant aid would only be provided if the playing surface of the new facility was only for tennis uniquely. So at that point, I made it public with the partners that I would not support such a proposal. And over the next period, the position appeared to change. I was advised that the agreement then was that the surface could be used for multi-sports. And this at last made perfect sense to me. It was not too difficult to envisage, good summer weather with local private clubs packed out with players and the Rankin Park facility lying unused when it could be used for other sports. And it could be used with the local community for netball, basketball, or indeed indoor hockey. A fully functioning indoor sports centre with the tennis being the priority sport was basically the best solution to me. It would be open to all and not just for the tennis playing community. So I assumed that common sense had at last prevailed. However, when I was requested recently by our corporate comms team to make a statement welcoming the project, and I was told that basically it was not possible to refer to any aspect of sports other than tennis. And that being the case, I declined to comment, and I also advised if this was the latest position, then I could not support it. And this continues to be my position, convener. So I would appreciate if we could get some clarification on where we're at with that one. Thank you.
Through you, convener, obviously the project has been taken forward through our partners in Inverclyde Leisure, who've been dealing with the applications, and it is through the Transforming Indoor Tennis Fund that the vast majority of the funding is coming through. So it's understandable that it's stated that it's predominantly for tennis use, but the surface is actually suitable for multi-sports use. It can be used for the majority of ball sports. My understanding is that it will be initially lined out for tennis, but it is possible to use it for other sports.
Thanks, convener. Thanks, Eddie. I mean, that is very, very welcome for me. And basically, as long as we spell that out when we're publicising this fantastic project, then I'm happy with that. But I think it's really a key consideration that it won't uniquely be for tennis, although that would be the predominant sport. Thanks for that.
Okay, anybody else want to come in? Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, I'm grateful for Eddie giving that clarification there, but I think we do need to realise that actually that's not the purpose of this report. I mean, the actual ownership of the project and ensuring it's meeting the needs of sport, whether that's tennis or multi-sport, lies with the Education and Communities Committee. This is about actually the proposed location and the implications of the consultation on it. So, but it's useful to have that clarification, because I think if we can have a facility that's suitable for multi-sports, that's absolutely better than having one that's only suitable for one sport.
Yeah, Jim?
Yeah, thanks, convener. I mean, I feel as if this has been a long process. We've been, I think it's now probably in its 5th year in order to bring this forward. I mean, and obviously what we've done is right back at the start, through my colleagues in the Labour group first of all, and then the council, we managed to get funding for this facility on the grounds it was going to be match funding, both with the LTA and with Sport Scotland. And no, honesty, since that time, we've been waiting and waiting with regard to funding, so much so that we then had problems with SEPA coming in, and we've had a long drawn out process to get this on the go. I take Councillor Alfield's comments on board, but really for me, it's about getting a first-class tennis facility that, yes, can be used for other sports, but getting a first-class tennis facility up and running within Inverclyde. And this is just another step towards that. And hopefully we can actually put a shovel in the ground sometime soon.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Can we agree the recommendations?
Great.
Okay.
Convener, sorry, through you, convener. In this instance, we need to determine if it's 3.2 is a 2 options recommendation. So you're either 3.2 or 3.2b. So it's whether you, having regard to the representations, you decide not to approve the proposed change of use, or you decide to approve the proposed change of use for construction of an outdoor tennis, etc.
Convener, I would be happy to support the project given the undertakings that Eddie's given us this afternoon. Thanks.
You okay with that, Peter?
Yep. So the decision of the committee is 3.1 and 3.2b.
Yeah.
3.2b, correct.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, and the rest of the papers to be held in private. If we've still got any members of the